started. I apologize again for the delay, but good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue. As we begin our meeting today, and on behalf of Ottawa City Council, I wish to acknowledge that Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe-Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation and honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their past and present contributions to this land. Just before we pause for a moment of reflection, I wanted to mention a couple of quick things. First of all, it is Councillor Bradley's birthday today. Happy birthday, Councillor Bradley.
Happy birthday, Jessica.
Also, I wanted to mention that last week I met with a group of religious leaders from throughout Ottawa to speak about the need for all of us to work together to ensure Ottawa remains safe and peaceful, and to denounce all forms of hatred and discrimination, no matter what is happening in other parts of the world. I'm grateful that we live in a city that has such strong faith leadership. Working together, we released a statement from faith leaders that was originally signed by about 30 to 35 leaders and has now been signed by more than 55 leaders, members of clergy in our city. En travaillant ensemble, nous publions cette déclaration.
By working together, we're publishing this declaration, and we invite other religious leaders to publish.
Pause for a moment of reflection. We recognize that there is tremendous pain and grief in our city right now. While we may not agree on everything, and at times it may seem like we agree on very little, here in Ottawa, we have a commitment that we share with every good person in the world. We will never tolerate what is going on around the world to be used as a justification for any form of discrimination, violence, or hate in our city. We will
never tolerate what's going on around the world to be used as a justification for any form of discrimination, violence, or hatred in our city.
We request the wonderful residents of our beloved city to join us in calling out all forms of hatred, to never glorify or take joy in violence. We urge everyone to never allow our ideologies, religious beliefs, or political positions to become a cause for hatred of another human being. Nous sommes tous les voisins, nous sommes solidaires les uns des autres et nous nous opposons à toutes les formes de haine.
We stand with each other against all forms of hate, now and forever.
We stand with each other and against all forms of hate, now and forever. Thank you. And let's now please rise, if you are able to do so, and pause for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you, and I'll ask you to continue standing if you don't mind, if you're able to, and I will ask Councillor Curry now to introduce the wonderful people who will be performing our national anthem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before we start, I'm hearing an echo. It's because all of those are on. Okay. This has been a day of technical glitches. Mr. Mayor, you may know that I am a teacher. I think I've told you that before. So this is one of my favorite days of council ever, to be here with some students that are going to sing us O Canada. I first want to start, though, by thanking the parents who drove their children here today, their students, and we really appreciate that. I know the school bus situation is not ideal at the moment, so thank you for bringing them all here for us to enjoy. You know, I became a teacher because I believe that if you can positively impact the life of a child, you make the world a better place. And the teacher we have here today has done that very thing. 14 years ago, a student came to her, knowing that she played the guitar, and asked if maybe she could teach him how to play the guitar. And from that, we have had the Recess Club at W. Erskine Johnson Guitar Club for students that now has over 100 members. It's an amazing thing, and I just want to thank you so much. This is an award-winning teacher, everyone. Just so you know, all across the district has been selected as one of the best teachers in our district. So I'll give you the official rundown of this group, but I'd like to introduce the Recess Guitar Club, led by teacher Stephanie Stevens. This is a unique and wonderful group at W. Erskine Johnson Public School. Children in grades 1 to 6 who are interested in music are invited to come and join the fun, singing, learning, and playing new instruments and performing. They have the opportunity to learn how to play the guitar and other instruments, such as bucket drums and boom whackers. The best part of RGC is how it builds confidence, creates a sense of community and belonging, and is a great civic creative outlet. Their club motto is "Everyone is welcome," and they meet every recess on a drop-in basis. Every year, the majority of the group are all new to the guitar club in September, but some choose to attend RGC rehearsals every day, sometimes twice a day. With 20 to 40 minutes of rehearsal a day, there's no wonder why they became so proficient so fast. They perform frequently in front of the school, which is music the children select and are keen to learn. They play at assemblies and concerts and are always a huge hit. Some of the kids sing, some drum, some play the guitar, but they all make music and have great fun doing so. Without further ado, here is the Recess Guitar Club from W. Erskine Johnson, not playing Imagine Dragons, not playing Taylor Swift, as you might have heard out there, but instead playing our national anthem.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for that great performance. Thank you for coming here today. Thanks to the parents. Thank you, Councillor Curry, for arranging that and for the introduction. Much appreciated. All right, let's get started. I'll ask the Deputy City Clerk now to please do the roll call.
Councillor Luloff.
About as present as one can be.
Councillor Dudas. Ici. Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Bradley.
Here.
Councillor Cheney.
Present.
Councillor Plante.
Ici.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Councillor Leeper.
Good morning.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Morning.
Councillor Carr.
Present.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor DeRose.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor DeRoche.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Let's move to the confirmation of minutes from the council meeting of October the 11th. Are the minutes carried? Declarations of interest, including those originally arising from prior meetings. Councillor Desroches.
Thank you, Mayor. I, Councillor Steve Desroches, declare a potential deemed indirect pecuniary interest on matters related to item 11, postponements and deferrals, 11.11 Hydro Auto Holdings, Inc. 2022 Annual Report on the agenda for meeting number 23 of the Ottawa City Council, meeting on Wednesday, October 25th, 2023, as my spouse is an employee with Hydro Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Desroches. Councillor Johnson.
I, Councillor Lane Johnson, declare a potential deemed indirect pecuniary interest on the following item to be considered by City Council agenda of October 25, 2023. Item 19, motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure, specifically the King Plant motion regarding demolition of 2029, 2031, 2041, 2045, and 2047 Beechwood Avenue, as my spouse has a financial relationship with the owners of the properties.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Are there any other declarations of interest? All right, I will note the communications on the agenda. There were no regrets that were filed. A motion to introduce reports. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. That the report from Hydro Ottawa Holding Incorporated entitled Hydro Ottawa Inc. 2022 Annual Report, that the report from the Integrity Commissioner entitled Report to Council on an inquiry respecting the conduct of members of the Manotick BIA Board of Management, Environment and Climate Change Committee Report 7, Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee Report 7, and the reports from the City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending October 20th, 2023, and Summary of Oral Written Public Submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of October 11th, 2023 be received and adopted as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Is that carried? Let's hold the Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. Annual Report and come back to that. Item 12 on the agenda is the report from the Integrity Commissioner. Is that carried? Item 13 is from the City Clerk. Item 13.1, the status update on council inquiries and motions for the period ending October 20th. Is that received? Item 14, the Environment and Climate Change Committee. Item 14.1 is the motion on Service Line Warranties of Canada Next Steps. Is that carried? Item 14.2 is a resident's petition for the installation of sanitary sewer infrastructure as a local improvement in Taunton Place. Is that carried? And then we have the bulk consent agenda. Is that carried? All right, let's return to item 11, which is the report from Hydro Ottawa. And I want to welcome the team from Hydro Ottawa here, including the chair of the board, Jim Durrell, and our CEO, Bryce Conrad. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge the leadership of Jim Durrell as the chair over several years now. This will be your final meeting as the board chair. And Jim, I want to thank you for all your leadership over the years, not just in this role, but in so many others in our community. And very grateful for all that you've done to serve our city, but especially as we're reflecting on today in your role as the chair of Hydro Ottawa. And before you pass the baton to another chair, I wanted to, on behalf of all of City Council, thank you for what you've done in this role. And you even went a little bit into overtime on this job because this meeting has been postponed a couple of times. But thank you for everything you've done. Okay, I'll turn it over to you and the team at Hydro Ottawa.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. This is way over time. As you know, this was to take place back in June, and discussing the financial report from 2022 as we are coming to a close of 23 seems somewhat redundant. I'll discuss three things with council today. One will be briefly the financial report, which I know that you've all had an opportunity to look at, and I will take as read. Two is the evolution of Hydro Ottawa as a company. And it has a great and direct impact on the goals of this council and as it has in past councils. And the third is the elephant in the room, and that was the strike, which was not pleasant for anybody. Last year, the elephant in the room was the Direcco and the impact that it had on not only the citizens of Ottawa, but also on Hydro Ottawa itself. And so dealing with the first item, the financial report, even with the derecho, which really affected us last year, the huge windstorm, we ended up in a position where we had still financially a pretty good year. The city will receive a dividend of $20 million. I will tell you that you would have had a dividend of $23 million plus without that big windstorm. The province had assured us that they would pay the extra money and make us whole, and they didn't. And they, in my estimation, copped out a bit by saying that you could put it on the rate base. And both the board and management felt that it would be inappropriate to put the additional dollars on the rate base because we'd already had enough of an imposition on our citizens as it is, many without power for over 6 days. And so we opted to not do that. I know the mayor is actively still working with the premier and with the province to try and rectify that, and I hope he succeeds. The second thing that I would like to discuss is the evolution of hydro. 10 years ago when I inherited this job, 95% of the net income, and remember, you own 100% of Hydro Ottawa. This is a 100% city-owned facility. Independently operated, I would say. The great thing about councils past and this one is that we are allowed ostensibly to operate hydro almost as a private company. And we're fortunate to always have a number of members of City Council on our board. But for the whole, the board is a very strong board, and both Councillors Curry and Dudas would concur with that, having sat on our board. It's an impressive group of men and women. And over the past 10 years, we've watched our net income go from the old standard distribution company to now 70%. And that shows the evolution. And I have to go back 10 years ago, we just were completing building the new convention center, now known as the Shaw Center. I came home, I said to my wife, Sam, she said, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, I'm going to become the chairman of Hydro Ottawa. She said, why would you do that? That's got to be the most boring thing in the world. And hydro was viewed as boring. You turned your lights on and they worked. That's really it. People don't give a lot of attention to hydro unless you have a big windstorm, a tornado. It works, and it works exceedingly well. But the problem is, as efficiencies happen, the furnaces that you bought 10 years ago, the refrigerators that you bought 10 years ago, the stoves that you bought 10 years ago, the air conditioners, they now operate at probably 50% better efficiency than the old ones. And so as consumption, even though it was rising with groups of people, the population growing, what we were able to bring in as an income was actually reducing because of the efficiencies that, thank goodness, were happening in the marketplace. And so we started to evolve, and the first thing we did was create a company, Portage Power, that runs the Chaudière Falls. This is the largest run-of-the-river, environmentally friendly operation that you'll see anywhere in the province of Ontario. And the Chaude right now could provide electricity to up to 110,000 homes in our city. We've continued to acquire other run-of-the-river operations because they are enormously environmentally friendly and, quite frankly, profitable to your company, Hydro Ottawa. The third corporation we created out of the holding company was Envari. And Envari is ostensibly the entrepreneurial arm of Hydro Ottawa. You would know it best because it was responsible for the street lighting program, which saved this city millions of dollars and has year in, year out. It's now doing ROPEC for you, your Robert O. Pickard Center. Envari is responsible for doing all of the work with Zibi, which, frankly has gone under the radar in this city. This is one of the most remarkable net zero operations. There's only a few in the world, and we have one right down at Victoria Falls, and in terms of Zibi, and we've done a tremendous job of working with them to see this happen. We're intimately involved now in the new Ottawa Hospital, which is going to be a major project for this city. And so Envari is something that can really help this city council. You've set very aggressive goals as a council to be net zero. And frankly, without dramatic change, you haven't got a hope in hell of making them in the times you've allotted, if you're honest with yourselves. And to make those changes, I would submit to you that Hydro Ottawa, through Envari, could help you greatly in the retrofit of your buildings and many other things that will help you achieve the goals that are aspirational but not realistic. The last is we've created a company, Hebrew, and this is a fiber optic company that was created in the past year and a half, and we've laid how many hundred kilometers? 267 under our city, and it will be able to adapt to 5G, 6G, whenever it is here. It's just another exciting arm of Hydro Ottawa. And so all of these companies were created to provide you with a multifaceted and highly profitable corporation that's environmentally friendly and profitable. And we've set our own goal to be net zero in 2030, and I will be highly disappointed if that doesn't happen. We're electrifying our fleet at this time. We've helped you with the buses. We're doing so many things in that regard. And the third issue, and again, we'll throw this open to questions after, is the elephant in the room, that's a strike. And we all have different views on strikes. Some of them are political views, some of them are personal views. My view is that in a strike, there is never any winner. Union always claims victory, management always claims victory, and quite frankly, the people who generally the strike was supposedly all about, the employees, are the ones that are hurt the most. And the strike at Hydro Ottawa was just another example of this happening. We were out for 85 days. While our management and the companies we were able to engage did a remarkable job at keeping Hydro going, as a corporation, we lost a considerable amount of money because we weren't able to do much of the capital work that is required to keep us up and present. The workers will probably take them 4 or 5 years to gain back what they lost. And why? You know, there are two things that happen in strikes. One is the company, the management of that company, the board of that company putting forward a responsible offer. We put forward an offer that all of you were aware was highly responsible and certainly in tune with what the city is paying its staff in offers, what other hydros were paying their staff, and what we felt the taxpayers, the people who are paying for hydro, could afford. The union was interested in the fact that they wanted to be placed in number 10th position at that time, and the hydros are all ranked, and frankly, management agreed with that. We're a big hydro, and that's where we should be. The ones in front of us are all Toronto-based, and Toronto obviously has a much higher cost of living than Ottawa, and that's reflected in everything that goes on, whether it's police, hydro, or anything else. And we agreed with that. And what evolved was surprising to management. It certainly was to us on the board, because there's always hubris in every strike that goes on, and information goes out, and I think Bryce did an outstanding job personally of keeping this city council, you as our shareholders, informed as to how the strike was moving. We heard issues that safety was a huge issue. Interestingly enough, safety was never a key issue at the negotiating table. Well, really, I mean, safety is fundamental to running a hydro operation, dealing with high voltage everywhere. I mean, to pretend that safety is not important to management or to the employees is silly. We've had over 1 million hours without a loss of day at work. So anybody that tells me that we're not a safe company or that we don't care about our people is whistling Dixie, frankly. That's just not the case. And so in the end, and you all received this letter yesterday, which kind of surprised me. And Bryce, I'll have Bryce talk to it, but first of all, why would you take to your membership an agreement for a vote if you didn't agree with it? Like, if you're the union management, you've been elected by the people to represent the people in that union. If you don't agree with that, it seldom goes to a vote. Or if you take it to a vote, you say, we disagree with this offer and we would suggest that you vote against it. That was not the case. The offer was accepted and accepted by the employees at large. All right? And to lament the fact that it wasn't 85 or 90%, what's democracy? Democracy still is 51%. Always has been, always will be in a vote. And the majority of the people working for Hydro deemed it to be a good offer and accepted it. To say that, again, the safety was a terrible issue, there is absolutely no foundation. And to say it took us 20 days to sign the memorandum of agreement. Most people in union agreements, including your own human resources department, would tell you that this is standard time. Agreements are complicated. They have to be viewed. They have to be viewed by legal counsels, and they just aren't signed on the spot. So this is, again, just something else that I'm at a loss at why this letter was written. So I'll finish that on the strike, because I know there will probably be more questions, but I found the letter, quite frankly, to be insulting to the management and the people of Hydro, and unwarranted. I would like to extend my thanks to over 10 years I worked with some remarkable men and women on our board. Many names long gone by that you wouldn't recognize now, but they served previous councils and this council with distinction. And as Councillors Curry and Councillors Dudas would tell you, they are truly a dedicated group of men and women, highly accomplished in our community, and they've done one hell of a job making Hydro a very successful company. I would also like to extend my thanks to Bryce and his management team. Over the last 10 years, we've watched Bryce put together one of the most highly successful, creative, and talented management teams of any Hydro anywhere. They're all highly sought after by other Hydros for their jobs, and only because they truly enjoy working here have we been fortunate enough to keep them. And so I say thank you to that. The report, Your Worship, is before you. It has recommendation that Council accepts the financials, that you appoint the new board members, and again, in the spirit of past board members, we've come up with a highly talented group of men and women to continue to serve you. I thank you for your attention today. I pass it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you. We'll go to questions now. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thanks for this update. I did just want to start by thanking the line workers, the frontline workers of Hydro Ottawa. I know they've gotten through us. They've gotten through us through so much in the last few years, and I think you saw that in public sentiment during those 85 days of how much they were appreciated by our city when we had those major climate incidences occur. And obviously, they're not at the table today, right? We can't hear from workers directly at the table. So I know some of those comments probably best placed for the board, or where workers can be represented to also speak to their issues that they experienced through that time. With that said, I just want to focus on one issue, and it is around the retrofit of city buildings. So I'd like to just ask, where we are in that process, because there's such a big savings that can come back from the city over time when we do this. The issue was always about the amount of funding up front to get that capital repairs, and then also the the need to retrofit or change those community facilities while they're under construction. So because they get shut down, obviously, or portions of them get shut down, and then that's a difficult thing for some communities. So just from your perspective, I know we were always looking at this, and I've been really trying to push this since last term, and I think we're on the right path now. I think we are, but where from your perspective are we at in terms of the retrofit of city buildings to get those retrofitted to save money on in the future? If you can just give us an update on that.
Bryce can answer this as well, but I think, Councillor, we're moving in the right track. In fairness to city staff, and I think you've already alluded to it, it's just not as simple as us going in and retrofitting a building. Where I think that we could be very advantageous to future renovations and retrofits as you come, is if I'm not, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Bryce, that we're at a position now where the city wants to retrofit ABC building. And we go out to tender, and we are, it's like tendering against your own staff. And tenders cost a great deal of money. We know what projects cost. Everybody ostensibly knows. Am I correct in that? Yeah, partially correct. Well, you can correct me further. But the bottom line is, I think the city could expedite these things personally, just looking, and I'm not being critical of anybody in this, by doing away somewhat, it sounds terrible, and moving more to sole source with Hydro Ottawa, because you ostensibly are going to be paying yourself. I'm not talking about overpaying, I'm not talking about inefficiencies, I'm talking about working within, much like we do many projects within the city itself, where city hires and we deal with city employees. We are an arm of the city, 100% owned by you, and I think there's room down the road for more communication and more work on that.
Yeah, I think the LED lighting project is a perfect example of that, and obviously it's internal workers that Hydro Ottawa employs as a board of ours. So just, I don't know if there's anything to add, Bryce, on this, but just, I've really been, I know the mayor agrees as well that we want to get more buildings retrofitted. We talked about this during the election. And so I think the point is we got to get on with a plan to how we're going to invest that capital up front that then pays us back over those 5 to 10 years where then we're making money. So love to hear more, Bryce, from you, and that'll be it for my questions.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, for the question. And Jim's correct. The short answer, without getting into the great gory details, is that we're obviously working with city staff. We had a meeting with Wendy and her team. They're working to identify what buildings would be eligible, where it would make financial sense to do that. Obviously, they're trying to prioritize based upon what you have to shut down and stuff of that nature. But the short answer is the money is still available, the opportunity is still there, and we're keen to get going on it, as is the city.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Bryce and Jim. It is, let me tell you, it's a treat to be on that board. It's actually a learning opportunity every single meeting. I'm sure Councillor Dudas would agree, to be surrounded by people who are so smart and so dedicated to making sure our city's maybe number one asset, close to number one asset in terms of revenue generation, is doing well. The comment that Councillor Menard made, in the Program and Services Review Committee, Hydro Ottawa did come to present, and so, this is the sneak peek at that, but on that list of recommendations that's coming out of that Program and Services Review will be those building retrofits. And so that conversation started long before that meeting and continues on since that meeting with city staff, as Bryce said. So you can look forward to that, but you already know now what's one of them is what's going to be on that list. I did want to ask Bryce for a comment on the letter we received as councillors. We received a letter last Friday from IBEW, and I just was wondering if you had more to say on that, Bryce, as Jim indicated you might have further comment.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So I guess I received a copy of the letter yesterday when you forwarded it to me, or when it was forwarded to me by a number of you. Look, I've been CEO for 12 years. I would suggest, as this conversation progresses, I think there's a distinction between the IBEW executive and the IBEW membership. And I think that's an important distinction to draw. So 12 years in the job, I would suggest I had very constructive relationships with the IBEW executive for the first 10. What was right was right, what was wrong was wrong. We could agree to differ, we could agree to have different opinions, but we were prepared to work together. The last 2 years have not been positive. The last 2 years have been very confrontational. Everything becomes a bit of a fight. And that led into the strike. To Jim's point, and I made this point publicly throughout the entire labor disruption, a strike or a labor disruption is never a good thing. It's a pox on both of our houses. Notwithstanding Councillor Menard's comments about the broad level of support for X or Y, there was no support for X or Y. The workers had no more support than management did. It's just an unfortunate place to be where quite frankly, the people in the middle are the businesses and the residents of Ottawa who got held hostage for over 3 months. So look, what I've committed to, and I don't want to belabor the comments in the letter. I didn't air the grievances. I didn't negotiate in public. I'm not about to start now. I'm about moving forward. I welcome the opportunity to revisit the relationship with the IBEW executive. I welcome the opportunity. I've said categorically, I will meet any member of my organization any time of day or night, anywhere in Ottawa. If they want to have a conversation about what we can do to make the company bigger and better, that's good. I'm all for it. So I'm not going to belabor the letter any more than it already has been. It will be obviously responded to. I'm about building the company back. I think that's what I owe the citizens and the residents and the businesses of Ottawa. That's what the board of directors expects of me and my management team, and that's where my focus will be.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Hello? Sorry about that. All right. Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to address some of my forward-looking concerns here. And I really am trying to look forward. Mr. Durrell, when you were saying earlier that when you took on the position, your wife said it's a boring job because, Hydro Ottawa, nobody thinks about Hydro Ottawa because it works. So I know that if I were to take that statement and print it verbatim and play that statement to a lot of areas of my ward, there would be some eyes rolling there. So Bryce and all of his team and people at IBEW that I've been having conversations with both sides for the past several months are well aware that there have been many pressing concerns in my ward and in the surrounding areas where there's been, in my opinion, a higher propensity of vulnerabilities and outages than in other areas. And I know that some of my councillor colleagues would argue that, but I'm pretty confident in what I just said there. And so I do look forward to having, and Bryce has been very open in meeting with me to address some of my ward-specific issues. But just to speak, and during the entire strike, it was certainly difficult because situations that were ongoing were compounded because of the disruption. And I really do hope that the spirit of going forward is embraced. I'll admit, I received a letter with a level of consternation and concern because I wasn't aware of whether or not there were other avenues for that. But I was equally concerned in the comments I heard from you today, sir, because it just felt like this here was not necessarily the forum to what felt like relitigating the strike. And I really do hope that there is a spirit of rapprochement between both sides in the honest interest in moving forward, and that some of these matters can continue to be settled and both sides can find that common ground. As to my forward-looking concerns, so Bryce, I thought you were going to be presenting here today. So I very much appreciate all of the willingness that Hydro Ottawa has said it will offer so that I can address some of my residents' concerns about the high propensity of outages. So it doesn't sound like you're presenting, but could you speak to some of the plans you having moving forward that aim to create some more resilience in some of the areas of our city, particularly around my ward and surrounding areas that do feel they are more vulnerable?
Yeah, certainly can, Councillor. And sir, we're in the practice of sort of taking the reports as kind of read, and I think the last thing anybody wants to hear me talk about is how we design a distribution grid at City Council. So we don't get into that level of detail here, but I'm obviously happy to engage with you directly and have, as you've noticed. So with respect to your specific ward and other wards in the area, Councillor Johnson's raised similar issues. Councillor Kelly I think he's on the video screen, has raised issues in his ward with respect to the propensity for outages. Each ward is fundamentally different. They're designed differently. In the case of your ward and Councillor Johnson's ward, they're hangovers from the PN Hydro days, so there were some things there. We had issues, as Councillor Hubley can attest, that we had in Canada for the longest time, which took us the better part of 4 or 5 years to address. The short answer is we are actively looking at your area. We identify what the outages are, why they're occurring, what complications there are in some wards. Your ward specifically has a lot of backyard infrastructure, as does Councillor Carr's ward. Makes it more difficult for our crews to access and do that work. I think the positive news, Councillor, going forward is this country, this government, this province is committed to a massive electrification project, if you will, the likes of which would be on par with building the St. Lawrence Seaway. Like, it's a massive, massive undertaking. And we're going to need to do our part of that to support the growth, to support the grid. As more and more people electrify their vehicles, they electrify their houses, they electrify everything, they're going to become more and more dependent on our product. So specifically, one of the things that came out of the derecho was the idea of looking at, a strategic undergrounding. We're an overhead city for the most part, except in the suburbs. Does it make sense to start to underground some of our key infrastructure? And the short answer, the report's come back to us. We're reviewing it still, but we've identified about $500 million worth of work across the city that will be put forward to the Ontario Energy Board for consideration as part of our next rate application. So the short answer, in your specific ward, there will be a number of projects aimed at that. But that's a 5 to 7 to 10 year remedy. There are things that we're doing today. There are things that we did during the labor disruption. We enhanced our tree trimming cycles. We did a lot of that. We enhanced our inspection services. Things that we're doing of that nature, which are sort of meant to proactively mitigate a disruption. We have station upgrades going on in Bell's Corners, which not your ward, but is fed by your ward. So as those projects come online and that capital work gets completed, hopefully there will be a tangential, consequential impact on reliability and in your ward. And I would just say, I think one outage is too many. Outages are a pain in the you-know-what. But you have best-in-class reliability in the city of Ottawa. Hydro Ottawa has best-in-class reliability amongst our peers. There's nobody in our group that has better reliability. So yes, it's really unfortunate, and I understand on a sunny afternoon, a sunny Sunday afternoon, when the power goes out and you have no idea why, how frustrating that is. I get it. I lived in Canada for a number of years and would routinely go home and have to reset the VCRs. I'm dating myself now. But I get how frustrating that is, but I just balance that off with the fact that the grid is available 99.99999% of the time. So,
thank you, Bryce. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to follow on that line of questioning a little bit in terms of, I'll call it the fair weather outages. I would concur. It concerns me that we have a number of these fair weather outages in today's grid system, but we're looking to add pressures to our grid system going forward with the electrification process. So I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit to the strategy that you have to ensure that not only are we improving the grid that we have, but improving it for the pressures that we're going to have in 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, for the question. I want to start, again, I don't want to sound defensive, so please apologize if it comes across as defensiveness. Outages are caused by any number of issues. They can be caused by trees, they can be caused by people digging in. In July, we had, I think the slide was up there, we had 7,000 lightning strikes in the city. Every day I became an amateur meteorologist, my team and I, and you're kind of looking at the weather going, oh God, not again. You had a tornado in your ward. I mean, we're not supposed to get tornadoes in Ottawa, okay? So outages happen, and they can happen for any number of reasons. Equipment failure is one reason, car accidents are another. I don't know what it is with Ottawa drivers, but they like to hit hydro poles. Trust me, it's not a good outcome. So, but it causes an impact. Yeah, we lose supply. It's the voice of God.
Mr. Mark, yeah, there you go.
We lose supply from Hydro One. That causes outages. So parking that so you all understand, and I'm happy to have a conversation about any specific outage in your ward. We're prepared to get into great gory detail with you about it. Your question, Councillor, with respect to electrification, yes, the short answer is the electrification process is underway. I think the electrification plans that have been set forth by the city might be a tad aggressive, if I'm being honest. I think we have done our own electrification plan through to 2050, which is a little bit more moderate, more in line with what Enbridge has put forward and with what the province has put forward through the IESO Pathways document. So the short answer is electrification is going to happen. We're expecting the number that I saw last week would be about 235% increase in the amount of electrical infrastructure or load. We will, sometime between 2025 and 2030, we will flip from being a summer peaking utility to a winter peaking utility. So our air conditioning load will be exceeded by our winter load. That's pretty phenomenal. That is a reflection of the adoption of sort of ground source power, heat pumps, et cetera, electric cars. So massive undertaking, you're probably looking at, we do about $100 million in capital on an annual basis. You're probably looking at $200 million in capital on an annual basis. So that is a huge, huge undertaking. I will be clear and tell you today that electrification process cannot be borne by ratepayers. That has to be supported by governments of all levels. You need additional support to do that. And if you look at what the federal government is talking about, they're largely focused on distribution and transmission and generation. They have yet to focus in a meaningful way on distribution. That's the part that happens. I can get the power here any way I want, but it's not going to your house unless we distribute that power. So that said, we're working closely with city staff, the Energy Evolution file. It is a work in progress. We're obviously bringing our best to the game. I have some of the smartest electrical engineers in town that are leading this initiative. So look forward to the product.
Thank you very much for that. Can you speak a little bit more to the transmission and generation piece? I know that that's not a Hydro Ottawa purview per se, but certainly going forward, do you have concerns with the generation and transmission of energy that you would need in order to successfully be able to distribute that?
I have concerns about lots of things, Councillor. So until you get utility scale, grid scale storage, that is something beyond a science project. Because right now they are effectively large scale science projects that have massive cross subsidization and subsidies by taxpayers. We need that. We need that level of battery storage, whatever means that is. We need to increase the amount of generation in our own service territory. The days of relying upon the big nuclear loads coming from, Bruce and Darlington, there's just not enough there to sort of meet the needs going forward. So we need to embed additional generation in our service territory. The closer it is, the better it is. You lose less on line losses. So yes, I think on the generation side, on the transmission side, it's not my purview. It's Hydro One for the most part. It's their purview. I don't think I need to tell you as city councilors and politicians how difficult it is to place and source infrastructure in any area. The last thing anybody wants to see is a high voltage tower cutting through their backyard. Well, those high voltage towers are needed for transmission. That's the way it flows. So scaling up that level of transmission is not an insignificant undertaking. So yeah, a concern.
No, thank you very much, because I share that concern, and certainly where that becomes real to me is when those fair weather outages or potentially an extreme act of weather translates to a -5 degree ice storm power outage for multiple days, where we run into major problems, which I think we've been very lucky with in the last few years per se. But with the way that I think climate is trending and extreme weather events are trending, that is a major concern. And so I guess what is the strategy that Hydro Ottawa would have, if next winter we have a multi-day, significant ice storm event where we have, how can you reassure your customers and your shareholder that you're going to be able to manage that?
Well, let's be very, very clear. Management of a multi-day outage requires time and energy and partnerships. So I don't ever, even during the derecho is a good example. We're not in this alone. Hydro Ottawa, yeah, we may be the tip of the spear, the sharp end of the sword, whatever analogy you want, but there wasn't a day that went by that I wasn't speaking to either the mayor or the city manager saying, I need this, I need that. So it's a partnership. If you have an outage, when the derecho happened, it was the end of May. I mean, we hadn't even had the air conditioning load at that point in time. So it was good timing, if you will, if there's ever such thing as good timing for an outage of that nature. But if that happened in the winter, in February when it's -30, yeah, we would be on the phone to the city saying, you need to open up heating centers here, 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 here. Or I would just send it to Wendy and say, that's your problem. I'm going to get the power back up. And quite frankly, that's expectation. I mean, we work with Alain on tree removal. We dispatch crews. It's a partnership. We're not alone in that fight.
No, thank you very much. I realize it's a difficult question. I wanted to ask it because it's something I'm really concerned about. I want to switch gears a little bit. My question is, with regard to the new investment for Hibu as a subsidiary, that component, it doesn't walk like a duck when we're talking about power generation, power distribution. It seems a little bit of a maybe not strange, but it's not like in terms of hydro energy distribution management. Can you just speak to the rationale behind why we got into the kind of the technical business on that side?
Sure. Well, in fact, we used to have a telecom company. We used to have Telecom Ottawa. We sold it to Atria Networks, which was then sold to Rogers 15, 20 years ago. If I could do it all over again, I'd probably have kept it. I wasn't there at the time, and neither was Jim, but look, the short answer is with the Internet of Things, with the amount of sensors and the array of technology that's being brought to bear in the electrical system, we were just paying, quite frankly, too much money to our telecom providers for a service. So we came up with a business rationale. It was supported by the Ontario Energy Board that we were going to drop 287 kilometers of fiber. That fiber would then allow us to sort of connect all of our stations, all of our sensors, all of our arrays. So that was the premise behind the project. What we did, if you're familiar with broadband, the cost of installing broadband is the civil work of dropping the broadband. It's not the pipe itself. So I could have put in 3 strands, which would have been just as much as I needed, or 5 strands. We put in 140. Whatever we don't use for ourselves, we can then monetize and sell off to other people, whether it be Rogers, Bell, whomever. So that was the rationale. It's simply an opportunity to monetize. It is something that, while not core to our business, it is something that we're familiar with. We've hired a team of people that are in that space. We had some of the best advice, the best minds, giving advice to the management and the board. And we look forward to being able to deploy it. I think you saw anything coming out of COVID was that there is, notwithstanding how prosperous we are as a city, there is a digital divide in this city. And so if we can somehow use that asset to sort of help breach that digital divide, working with Ottawa Community Housing, working with some other areas, then it's a worthwhile endeavor. We are patient with this project. It's not a project that's going to be making us a whole lot of money anytime in the very near future, but we have a forecast and a business plan to sort of where it will.
Okay, thank you very much. And my last question is with regards to the acquisition of the Goleta generating station. I know that's a new acquisition. Can you speak to that in terms of maintenance, business case, and upgrades? Because I know that's an older system, and I just wanted to get an appreciation for the intent behind that and what you forecast coming from that acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. First, I won't accuse you of being ageist towards my generating portfolio. The short answer is Hydro Ottawa owns and has operated the oldest generating station in Canada. We have a generating station that's working just nicely today. Thank you very much. Dates back to 1867. So if you manage, maintain those assets, they are good as gold. So yes, we acquired Appleton and Goleta last year through the board. We have a board process to do so. Both of them were acquired. Both of them are now part of the generating portfolio. They're both run a river, so we have what do we have, 19, 20, 21 assets now, I believe, I'll run a river. So we do have, it is a core competency for the company. We know how to work them, we know how to run them. We have a couple of staff up there managing and maintaining them. Yes, they need to be maintained. Yes, we invest in them. But if you invest in them, again, going back to what I said about generation requirements going forward and the electrification project in general, you need more and more of those assets closer and closer to the city of Ottawa. And unless someone's developing a small modular nuclear reactor anytime in the very near future, those are the two that we're going to be relying on, those two, as well as Chaudière and some other assets.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Luloff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And thanks, Jim, for your long service and for your candid comments today. It's rare to hear such honesty and common sense in a public forum like this. And as you're aware, I work very hard to operate in the same way. So I find your approach particularly refreshing. Bryce, you are always there when I call you. You're accountable and available, and I want you to know how appreciated you are. Just one example, I called you earlier this year about a leaning pole in the Prizeau district, and it was replaced within 24 hours. Thank you. This is a really stark difference between dealing with you and our provincial counterparts who have taken over a year to electrify Winsome Terrace, take years to make line repairs to street lighting, and are largely unresponsive to the needs of our community. You and your team have worked exceptionally hard over the last 5 years, and we're deeply grateful for that. Now, oftentimes we lose power due to a failure on the Hydro One grid feeding us, particularly at the Bilberry trunk. How's that conversation going? We've had dozens of outages over the last year caused by the provincial grid. And with more people working from home, this is contributing to a major loss in productivity and a loss in confidence in our service, which frankly is not fair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, and thank you for the comments. I mean, obviously, I'm not the one restoring power. That's the men and women that work in the front lines for Hydro Ottawa, and they, as I've said before, they're nothing short of inspirational when the chips are down. So I appreciate that, and we'll pass that along. With respect to Hydro One, what I would say is twofold. One is they're a much different company today than they were 6, 7, 8 years ago. They've gone private. They're publicly traded, obviously, as you know. Where they used to be effectively a provincial crown corporation, they are now very much subject to the demands and whims of shareholders. They're much more responsive company today than they used to be. You know, if there's an outage or an issue that you can't get addressed, the CEO will respond to me within minutes. We had a situation, I think, in the West End where they were doing some work, and it was putting our assets in a precarious position. We were going to be, you know, multiple days having one transformer half loaded. If something happened, we would have dropped 5,000 customers, 10,000 customers, and there would have been nothing I could have done about it. I simply sent a message to the CEO saying, like, this doesn't work for me. I need better. You need to be better than this. He was in Singapore doing investor meetings and instantaneously responded and with respect, kicked his team in the butt and got them going. So they're better from our perspective and to deal with. It still feels a bit like Toronto every once in a while. You know, they think they're the center of the universe and we're some sort of hybrid suburb at times. But generally speaking, they're much more responsive. And you know, one of the things that we've done successfully, unsuccessfully, I'll let you folks be the determining factors, is we've given you a channel to sort of interact with us. You know, if there's an issue, you call Julie or you call me, whatever, you'll get an immediate response. I would suggest Hydro One needs to do something similar for you. And I've raised that with their CEO and suggested even having somebody, you know, from a regional perspective that's responsive to the councillors who are served by Hydro One would be advantageous. And yes, I saw your streetlight issue out there. I wish I could just roll one of my Enviri trucks and fix it for you, but it's not my problem or not my issue to solve, unfortunately.
Well, if you're having a chitty chat with them in the next couple of days, we'd really like, after waiting for a year, to have the streetlights on Winsome Terrace up and running before kids are out for Halloween because it's pitch black.
Seeing him tonight. I'll raise it with him.
Okay, great. And, you know, Centrum Boulevard, that would be great too, for some help there. And we still are waiting on Hydro One to come out and electrify the new PXOs at Portobello and Valet. Anytime, that'd be great. How's the upgrading of the grid in Orleans going? I know that we saw lots of trucks out doing a lot of work this summer. How's your work going on that?
Yeah, my Chief of Operations Officer, Guillaume Paradis, is here with us. I think he lives in fear of getting emails from either yourself or Councillor Dudas, because it's usually a sign that something's gone wrong in that Bilberry Award. But the short answer is we've escalated it. We've kept it. You know, we effectively have people on standby, you know, who jump at it when it happens. There have been significant investments made. We've done a lot of work out there. We've accelerated some of the tree trimming and the vegetation management out there, which will get you through for the next few years. But we also have plans for a brand new substation out there, which will hopefully give you a more redundant, reliable power source going forward. But that's probably a 5 to 7 year project.
Well, I appreciate that it's on the radar. That trunk feeds a great deal of Councillor Dudas's ward and mine as well. And I think that resiliency and that redundancy will go a real long way to restoring some confidence. So thank you for that. What role do you see natural gas playing in a resilient grid moving forward? You know, be it private generation at the home or as part of a larger system?
Yeah, so with respect to natural gas and Enbridge, I think I'm not an expert on natural gas. I'm not even an expert in energy, but I think you have to look at energy as from a holistic perspective and an integrated perspective. I think the IESO, the Independent Electricity System Operator, has come out with a paper saying the idea of going gas-free by 2030 is, I won't put words in their mouth, but it's difficult, if not impossible. I think it suggests it would result in massive blackouts and rolling blackouts. It would also increase cost to the customer to, I think the tune was $100 a month, which obviously is not insignificant. So I think natural gas is it's an underground resource, it's reliable. The vast majority of people living in Ottawa have a natural gas furnace. I think the concept of being gas-free by 2030 is just, it's not realistic. I think it will be a transitional energy source as we electrify. So with a bit of luck, one comes down as the other goes up. But I'd also just say the grid is 90% emitting free. The grid represents 3% of GHG emissions in Ontario. So there are more low-hanging fruit if you're looking to reduce GHGs. There are more low-hanging fruit than the grid. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Bryce. I appreciate that. Just one more question, I suppose. Do you see the possibility of waste energy providing an alternative source of energy production as a positive prospect for our future?
So we have two waste energy facilities already working, and they have been working for one for 16 years, the other for 12 years. So we have Trail Road, which is obviously owned by the city. We have 6 megs of generating coming off of that, out of the methane from that facility. And then we have an asset down in Moose Creek, which is obviously closer to your neck of the woods than mine. But it is also generating 5 megs. So waste energy is not a science project, it is a real thing. I think it's an entirely valid approach to generating energy. I think it's, obviously it's renewable, and it's a good way. I mean, what better way to make energy from the garbage that you threw away 30, 40 years ago. So yeah, we're fans, we're supporters, hell, we're owners.
Thank you very much for your insights today. Let's just get the hydro wires buried on St. Joseph, and we'll all have a wonderful year next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Luloff. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Misters Conrad and Durrell, for the presentation this morning. It's appreciated. You had mentioned from just on the financial side, Ottawa Hydro, despite a commitment from the province to offset some of the costs that we incurred for the derecho, have not delivered. Are you aware of any other power agencies in Eastern Ontario who were impacted by the derecho who have received funds, and we're the lone agency that hasn't, or are we all in the same boat? I'm just trying to wrap my head around this.
No, I'm happy to thanks for the question first, Councillor. So the Ontario Energy Board has a process called a Z factor application. So in the event of a massive, we book capital, we do capital 5 years in advance, 7 years in advance in some cases. We plan for and we deliver. Part of that is here's what the context and the construct of the next 5 years will look like. Obviously, none of us ever planned on a derecho event. So those sorts of things are anomalies. They're not built into our numbers. They obviously impact us. The derecho hit us to the tune of $25 million. Hit you to the tune of 3.2. Your dividend would have been $23.2 million. It's 20. We could have pursued a Z factor application whereby we go forward to the Ontario Energy Board saying this storm event cost us $25 million. We want recovery for that $25 million. There is not a pot of cash that the province has for storms. So all they would do, as the chair has said, is turn around and they would we would put a rider on the ratepayers of Ottawa to pay for that. So in our estimation, the management and board, we felt that the residents of Ottawa had endured enough. They had spent 10, 11, 12 days without power. The last thing we were going to do was rub salt in the wound by then saying, oh, by the way, you need to pay more to help us recover what the lost amount was. So that money came off of our bottom line. So to answer your question, Councillor, Alexicon, which is the utility, it's kind of sort of Quinte, Belleville, it's kind of an incongruent group of municipalities. I think there's 4 or 5. They have gone forward with a Z factor application, but they have not been successful yet. It's not been heard yet.
So just so I'm 100% clear, the province said they would be open to an application if you chose to go down that road.
Correct.
but they did not say, I guess at the beginning of the direct show, we have a pot of cash that if you need financial help, regardless of the application to go to ratepayers, we will provide you money. That was not the commitment. Is that correct?
I don't think we got into a very specific debate. I mean, the Premier said, I think the Mayor at the time suggested that all three party leaders said that they would, it was election as you recall, all three party leaders said that they would hold the city whole for their losses. I think the city's side of the bill was 25, 27 million, 24 million. Ours is 25 million. I think that's below the threshold for disaster assistance for the city of Ottawa. So, and even if I don't think our number can be factored into that conversation because we do have this other venue to recover, but we just felt it was inappropriate.
Okay, on another question, you have acknowledged multiple times the severity of weather events, both those that have occurred and more weather events that are going to happen in the future. The question I get all the time is how is Hydro Ottawa building capacity, building resiliency for the system to basically safeguard infrastructure and reduce the number of occurrences? You acknowledge we're going to get more of it, we're going to have more power outages. Okay, so how can we collectively protect as best we can the system to minimize those occurrences? How can I share that information with customers? How have you been sharing that information with customers given the number or the frequency that that question is being asked?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will tell you today categorically, last year we had 3 multi-day outages. I don't know what next year holds, but I guarantee you it's just a question of time before we have another multi-day outage. I don't know which gods we've pissed off, but we have clearly alienated somebody from the weather perspective. So it's going to happen. What are we doing about it? Obviously, we've enhanced our tree trimming cycles. We're doubling down on our infrastructure investments. I talked earlier with Councillor Devine about sort of strategic undergrounding of certain assets. We're building more and more substations to allow for the electrification projects going forward. So the system is going to be built and it's going to be continue to be, it has been built, it's going to continue to be built up even further. But to be very categorically clear, infrastructure does not stand up well to 195-kilometer-hour winds. So there's no pole available today that will stand up to that wind. Certainly not one that we can afford, or that our ratepayers can afford on a massive scale. So my advice, that we've met individually with a number of you to talk about specific issues in your ward, and I'm happy to talk, Councillor, with you as well. My advice, first and foremost, is that the residents of Ottawa need to be prepared individually as a household for multi-day outages. It may be 1 day, it may be 2 day, it may be 3 day, but they gotta be a little more self-sufficient than what we have seen to date.
Okay, I'd certainly like, I chair the Emergency Preparedness Committee. I'd certainly like to sit down with you after today to talk about it. My last question, Mayor, is just River Ward does not have the same level of growth that maybe some of the suburban wards do as far as residential and other structures that are being built. But I have heard in my ward as recently as last week touring a site about the backlog or the time backlog to get connections done, some capital work, infrastructure delivered. Can you talk to sort of what your plan is now going forward? How do you reduce wait times of 80 weeks? Some people are being quoted now down to about 55 for certain work that certainly did not take that long in the past. What's the plan?
Yeah, I want to make sure we're not mixing our metaphors here, Councillor. So connections, so the issue of connections, that is something that we do on a daily basis. That is obviously something that was impacted by the labor disruption. I didn't have a workforce to do connections. So there, when people wanted to install Generacs or generators or hot tubs or upgrade their services or, new buildings, we simply didn't have a workforce that was capable of doing that. We now have that workforce back. We have a backlog that we're addressing. It will likely take us through to Q1 to catch up to where we were. So that's kind of the connection side. I think what you're talking about specifically is more on the equipment side, and that's supply chain. That's what used to take us 23, 24 weeks to order and receive is now taking us 70, 75 weeks. And they're not coming from places that we necessarily would ever otherwise be doing business with. Like, we're not getting some of the quality products that we used to get. Now, the good news is with the Infrastructure Reduction Act south of the border, you're seeing a lot of that manufacturing industry move back, sort of move back into the US. I was down there last week, and if they could run 3-4 shifts a day, they would run 3 or 4 shifts a day. They simply can't find workers to work 3 or 4 shifts a day, but the demand is there. So switchgear, transformers, key pieces of the distribution are backlogged. And the real unfortunate aspect of this is we're actually competing against other utilities for that infrastructure. So you're seeing prices go up, right? So what was X is now 3X. So completely sympathetic. I've had a number of conversations with a number of places saying, I wish I could do something. If you have a specific one, talk to us. If there's an opportunity for us to sort of move a project around, move something from one place to another, we're happy to do so, if we can do it in a legitimate and meaningful way.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jim and Bryce, for your comments. Appreciate it. And no, I'm not driving the car. I'm in the back seat, in case anyone's wondering, on my way to Toronto, but did want to miss this meeting. Appreciate your comments. And Jim, by the way, some of my residents were over 9 days during the derecho without power, just so you're aware. And some have been up to 15 days since 2022, a total of 15 days. So it's been pretty hard, and it's something we're all getting our heads around. And it's, hydro is no longer boring. It's made life interesting for all of us. I appreciate the proactive work and tree trimming. I appreciated getting the memos on that for certain areas, and please keep that coming. That gives me an opportunity to talk to residents and tell them that something's happening that will help prevent power outages in the first place, especially in areas where it's a smaller grouping of houses that are out of power. We know that those take the longest to get to. So appreciate that. And communication, it's still been an ongoing issue. We've talked before, especially afterwards. People, let's face it, they feel that they've been picked on because their power went out longer than others. And it's, I know this is a difficult subject, but we still have to talk to residents and deal with that. And I just wanted to ask, in terms of burying lines, what is the strategy on that? Clearly it's for larger areas, so I just, for main lines, but what kind of plan is there for that? Thanks.
Sorry, Councillor, it's difficult to hear you, but I think I got the question was, what's the plan around burying the lines? So again, we, as a commitment following the derecho event, we committed to doing a strategic undergrounding study. That study has been completed, is being reviewed by the electrical engineers that I talked about earlier. I don't know the specifics as to which projects will go forward. I do know that there's about $500 million worth of undergrounding that will be put forward as part of our next rate application. So I don't know necessarily where they all are. I have a sense as to where some of them are. But that is, we do have a plan, I guess, is for lack of a better plan. Okay.
Thank you. And in terms of communications, we still have to work on some issues such as, can you hear me? Are you hearing me all right?
Yeah,
okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. Issues such as even the power outage map still needs some work, and I'm hoping we can work together. I appreciate Julie's work with us, and I just want to make sure that that's still on the radar in terms of improving and to identify homes that are without power quicker in terms of estimates of power returned. Obviously, we're getting a lot of practice, which we don't want, but we're getting a lot of practice on this.
Yeah, and again, the labor disruption circumvented some of the progress that we were making, but we are preparing to launch a new outage map, which will be a little bit more tactical than the one that's currently on there. And then the second part, which I think is a real game changer, is SMS messaging, text messaging. So when you're out of power, you'll get a text message saying that you're out of power, or we think you're out of power. Those two projects should hopefully come through by the end of calendar year, which will obviously help with some of the communications challenges, Councillor. But we're happy to talk if there's specifics that you want above and beyond that.
Thank you. Another issue I discovered in the springtime outage was that in terms of prioritization, condo buildings, some of my older condo buildings were listed as one customer. So we're not prioritized. I brought this to the attention of your team, and it helped. But there's hundreds and hundreds of people in that building, but because it's listed as one hydro customer, it was put down lower on the list. Can I see that improved? Because we certainly don't want that to happen again.
Yeah, my first interaction with Councillor Devine was him calling me at about 9:30 right before last Christmas to tell me that he had an outage in his ward, which I was completely unaware of because I don't get outage notifications for less than one, or for one or less than 10. But she promptly told me, no, it's actually an apartment building of 270. So yes, we need to fix that, Councillor. We don't have an easy fix for it, but it needs to be fixed.
I appreciate it because they're almost all seniors and very high population. So that will be helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, gentlemen. And very briefly, I just wanted to delve into some of the numbers around generation. It sounds like you've got, I think you said 22 assets now in the Portage division of Ottawa Hydro, and that you're looking to establish more. There's 45 million in generation revenue in 2022. I just want to make sure I understand that number correctly. Is that all externally sourced, or is any of that internal transfers, buying your own power?
So our generating assets, I don't have the $45 million number in front of me. Our generating assets are contracted for the most part. So they're contracted back to the province into the central grid. The ones that are in Ontario, the ones that we have south of the border are obviously sold into the next day market in the New York system.
Right, okay, so that 45 million is contracted by the province back into the grid.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. There's no indication of what the operating costs are for the generation. That's not broken out. I'm wondering how profitable on an operating basis the generation is.
It's a great question, Councillor. So obviously different assets are different places in their life cycles. So some are more profitable than others, but on balance, they're all doing well. Some exception to sometimes in the day ahead market in the US, that pricing is not as good as it otherwise would be, although we got good news yesterday on one. So they're profitable. As an entity, it's profitable.
Are you able to provide us with a broken out operating expenses number for that generation business?
Well, we do the board level, so yeah, 100%.
Okay, I'd look forward to seeing that. It's not in the numbers that are in the 2022 report, so.
It might be in the statements, Councillor, but anyway, don't worry, we'll get it for you.
Thank you. And then the financing costs for hydro are also consolidated. How much debt have you brought on in order to acquire these assets? And then what are your financing costs associated with that division?
Most, if not all of the debt is non-recourse project financed. So it's not, it shows on our debt levels, but it's project level. So we can, again, get you that number if that's of interest. One of the things that impacted our financials last year and again this year that's obviously is 12 straight increases to the Bank of Canada rate. Our interest costs, our borrowing costs have increased substantially. So the good news is the project level stuff is usually fixed.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's 64.8 million for your overall financing costs. I cannot imagine that these assets are a huge portion of that, but I wouldn't mind taking a look at that broken out number. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks to you and thanks to the workers as well for a good year under challenging circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor DeRuse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'd like to take a moment actually to recognize and thank Jim for his service on the board. I know that he worked and served with amazing board of director, and I want to thank him for the service he's been doing for the citizens of the city of Ottawa. I also want to take a moment to highlight and thank Bryce. I know maybe I have in my ward, probably I don't have as much as Hydro Ottawa resident on the grid, but I do have lots of Hydro One, and we have challenges all the time. I want to take a moment to thank Bryce and his team, of course. Even though when we have a Hydro One, Councillor Kit, myself, and Councillor Rudolph, we struggle to get some contact, and your team has been amazing to help us and provide us. Even though it's a Hydro One, you've been always great help for us, and you support us with the contact. So I'm hoping Hydro One will learn the model that Hydro Ottawa here have in the communication, like Councillor Kavanagh mentioned. Communication is a key. And I understand from a rural resident the challenge that Hydro Ottawa is facing and the ambitious target that we have in the city from electrifying things. And in rural Ottawa, we cannot live only on electricity because our electricity is not reliable, and we need other sources from a natural gas, because if the power goes on, we have some pump we need to be able to use, and our generator, most of it, which is our resident right now, are resilient. I'm trying to learn from what we've been facing. We can't really control Mother Nature, and I don't know what Bryce mentioned. Maybe we pissed somebody off, and we've been having those weather occurrence, and they're not going to stop. So I just want to take a moment to highlight in the city of Ottawa, we have a lot of challenges from hydro perspective, and we need many other sources. And the challenges is we have rural, urban, and suburban, and I'm hoping one day we'll have a Hydro Ottawa everywhere in rural Ottawa to be able to get the service that Ottawa Hydro provide. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Bryce and Jim again, and the board of directors for your service, and for the men and women that they were always out in the cold and in the rain to restore our power. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeRuse. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I just want to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Durrell for his community service. I think the first time we met was back in the 1980s, and I can't think of a more perfect example of selfless community service for all the things you've been involved with over the years. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for your service here. I don't know what your family's going to do with you home now more, but that's for them to sort out. And I also want to thank Bryce for all the work. As Bryce mentioned earlier, there's been issues in my ward and every other ward, but I always know when I reach out to Bryce and his team that we're going to get action, we're going to get answers, and sometimes it takes a little longer, but things always get fixed. And so I can't thank you enough for that, and all the people at Hydro for the work that they do to keep the lights on. And so thank you. That's all I want to say, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor Hubley. Is this item carried? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Jim, Bryce, thank you both once again. All right, let's move on to the rest of the agenda. There are no in-camera items, so motion to adopt reports. Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mayor. I apologize. I actually read the wrong motion the first time. I should have ended with received and considered. So I will move to the actual motion now. The report from the Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. entitled Hydro Ottawa Holding Inc. 2022 Annual Report. The report from the Integrity Commissioner entitled Report to Council on Inquiry Respecting the Conduct of Members of the Manotick BIA Board of Management. Environment and Climate Change Committee Report 7. Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee Report 7, and the reports from the City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending October 20, 2023, and summary of oral and written public submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting October 11th, 2023, be received and adopted as amended.
Is that carried? Motions of which notice has previously been given. A motion from Councillor Carr on city response to flooding events. Councillor Carr, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you very much. I'll speak to it first, or do I need to read the motion? No, I'll speak to it.
Whatever you like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. If we could put the motion up on screen, it would be helpful. Thank you. On August 10th of this year, my ward, Alta Vista Ward, along with many other wards across the city, received a significant amount of rain that resulted in a tremendous amount of flooding. In 2017, we had a similar situation at that time. It was called a 1 in 100 years situation, but of course, with climate change, it happened again in 2023. Several days, or the day of the flood, and a few days later, my office was literally flooded with calls from residents concerned about what had happened. But when I inquired with city staff, only 2 floods had been reported in my area, despite the fact that I was receiving hundreds and hundreds of calls. City staff were extremely responsive and had a meeting in my ward, I believe it was August 23rd, and developed a sort of a form, a questionnaire for residents to fill out that enabled folks to identify the issue that they were having, asked what sort of measures they had in place with respect to backwater valves, or if they'd taken part of the residential plumbing program, and also asked a variety of questions. And it's been very, very helpful in order for staff to determine what the causes are of particular floods and be able to address the needs of residents, whether they just need to enroll in a program or whether there's a more systemic issue. And throughout this entire process, I mean, we're looking for answers on the, what happened in all these cases. It's been extremely unfortunate for residents. Many have had multiple floods in the same area, have lost their insurance coverage, and my office has sort of been triaging all of these requests. And I know that there's similar concerns in other wards. Councillor Brockington and Councillor Menard, Councillor Devine, and I have also had similar issues. And I think as we're going forward and we understand the extent of the impacts of climate change, we're going to see these events more and more frequently. And I think in order to best serve the citizens of Ottawa, we need to have a little bit better way to coordinate the information. And so I've been working with 311 staff, with the staff in Tammy Rose's area, in order to figure out how we do this going forward. And I think what's really important is that instead of addressing things through a program lens all the time, we need to look at it from the lens of a client. What do I do when I have a flood? Who can help me? And so recommendation is that, we need to, and sorry, I'll just add that the other thing that really came out is that our programs that we have for preventative measures are not addressing client needs. They're extremely cumbersome. The forms are really difficult to fill out. We don't have any opportunity to provide money up front to clients. If you look at programs that other municipalities have, they certainly are more than the $1,000 programs that we offer. So overall, I think we need to address this a little bit better. So the recommendations in the motion, I'll just read out the therefore be resolved clauses are that therefore be it resolved that staff ensure that ottawa.ca provides clear information on and the appropriate way to report different types of flooding events. Be it further resolved that the city's website have a centralized location for flood resources, including flooding preparedness and mitigation methods, updates on ongoing studies, and updates to infrastructure. And be it further resolved that staff review and report back to council with findings on improvements that can be made to preventative flood and water management programs, including the Compassionate Grant Program and the Residential Protective Program. And be it further resolved that staff explore a system for better data sharing, communication, timely response, and coordination in relation to major weather events, their impacts on infrastructure, and communicating with affected residents. And as it stands now, just to mention, I still have, hundreds of people in my ward that are waiting for answers, that are looking for what we can do to help them. And, I think even having those studies online or explaining to people what's been found out would enable me to do my job better as councillor as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. And first, thank you to my colleague, Councillor Carr, for her work on this motion. I'm happy to second, but she's certainly done the heavy lifting on the motion. And I'm certainly one of the, I think, 5 wards that staff have identified that were significantly impacted, in particular from the August 10th storm. And I would estimate that dozens of streets, as I said in the past, have been impacted in my ward, and hundreds of households have sustained significant damage. Some people are giving me quotes of up to $50,000, which their insurance company does not cover. So I support the motion before us, but the main question that my residents are asking now that we're 2.5 months after this major storm is, what is the city doing? I've broken down the issue into three main concerns. One is people observed the actual street itself flooding, which is not as severe as the next two. Water penetration into people's homes. So there are different sources of how the water got in, but obviously water has either come in from the exterior in or has come up through the sewer grate in the basement. And we have seen at least 3 examples where water from parks that abut people's homes was not captured properly on site and literally flowed or cascaded into people's multiple homes. So there's obviously infrastructure that has to be looked at in these parks. So 2.5 months later, my office is being bombarded by people who have gone through different steps, now dealing with their insurance company. And the main question is, how are we as a city responding to these identifiable streets? People can tell us clearly what the issues have been that they experienced. And I acknowledge staff and I have spoken. They have a huge volume of streets that they have to assess, as well as the infrastructure. But if staff could just clearly outline your process on this matter, how are you triaging the streets that councillors are bringing to your attention? What type of work are you doing? And how can we report this back to the public so we can assure them that the city is looking at their streets, is assessing the infrastructure, because we continue to get a significant number of questions in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you both to Councillors Brockington and Carr. We support the motion, and we do understand how disruptive this can be for residents, right? Especially if they have basements that may have been finished and flooded. And so I appreciate the amount of time and disruption that is. We do have engineering staff and programs in place, and I do have Sue Johns, the Director of Asset Management, at the table, who can speak maybe a little bit more specifically to this latest event. But our teams have been working on flood mitigation for over 20 years. Through multiple councils, we've seen hundreds of millions of dollars invested through specific programs or projects to mitigate flooding, right? Including the $232 million combined sewage storage tunnel. So I appreciate that some of the work that we do does take time, and so I know that can be frustrating for people to hear that, but I think there's an opportunity for us to communicate on what we're doing, how we're doing it, and reporting back. And maybe I can ask Sue to maybe add a bit further to that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a complicated system, and these type of events, which we are seeing and expecting more frequently, in this case, they were quite localized. We had certainly information of much higher impacts in some areas of the city than others. And an engineering approach to this is what happened and what kind of data can we collect. The water's all gone. And so we do rely on the information that you mentioned, Councillor, and certainly the information that Councillor Carr mentioned as well in terms of a more detailed collection of information of residents' experience on their properties. The system-wide analysis of, we'd have the weather information from Environment Canada, the experience and the monitoring that we have in our infrastructure. It does take some time, and we are open to sharing our collective experience at the end of here's what happened, here's the rain, here's the time that it fell, here's the time of observations of and what was reported, to be able to show how well the system performed or didn't perform, and when it was overwhelmed, what impact that had to a significant effect for a lot of people, unfortunately. How well the system performs is definitely taken into consideration with our annual prioritization for renewal. The age of the pipe, there are other factors, but certainly this type of event does earn a project, earn a street points, let's say, in terms of the annual prioritization, which is considers not only one system, but the other pipes if there are as well. So when we have experience like this, it tells us more about the system, and certainly our experience in Councillor Carr's ward is that the level of interaction and data collection that we have piloted there and expect to be able to expand is giving us information that we don't otherwise have access to. So it is worth our effort. It is telling us more about the system, which lets us be better informed for decision-making and recommendations for improvements. Some of the scope of the motion includes, there's a public education aspect a little bit in terms of people accessing, because the system is pipes and ditches, but it's also private property, private plumbing, and we want to make sure that all of the elements, all of the variables in a system, there are opportunities for residents themselves to make improvements that can have an effect. So that is an important part that we are very interested in making sure. An opportunity to talk about this in a comprehensive way is a great opportunity for us to help the public.
That's excellent, thank you. And look, I want to acknowledge that up to 110 millimeters in a 3-hour period will result in flooding. It's not a normal amount of rain, and we can't build our pipes to be, the diameter of the ceiling here above us. The communication from some of my residents, though, indicate that there may be on some streets a chronic issue. And so, are you confirming that streets that have been brought to your attention will be assessed at some point? Will staff go and determine to see, is there a blockage? Is there deterioration of the infrastructure that may be contributing to proper flow? Because people are seeking answers. I need to clearly report back. So for the streets that are being reported to staff, will they eventually be assessed and a determination of, no, they're fine, it was just a huge amount of water that couldn't be processed, or there may be issues that we need to note and we will be following up on further? What do I say?
Mr. Mayor, that's an excellent goal, and I share that goal. It would always be our stepwise investigation, right? Was it just a blockage to be able to reach those engineering conclusions of action needed or system overwhelmed by rain? So yes, I hope that's the level of detail that we will have if as applicable to those streets, yes.
I look forward to continuing to working with you both on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair.
Mon Dieu. Can I talk now? All right. One day I'll figure this all out. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So I very much appreciate the motion and the spirit behind the motion. I'm generally supportive of it. I just want to address a few things out of concern about whether or not there's too particular a focus on one area and not others, and also just to ensure that we're not redoubling efforts that are already underway. Because I do understand that the city, either through infrastructure or through emergency services, has an overarching strategy about how do we, in the face of such a wide array of natural disasters over the several past years, how do we best prepare our residents and how do we best respond to it? And yes, my ward is one of the wards that, in my opinion, has been quite severely impacted by any wide array of natural disasters, floods, windstorms, ice storms, and the like. And I suppose that's the first part of my question. So I see this motion in two categories. The first two, be it resolves, are about how can we collect and report information, collect information from residents, report it back, centralize that on our website. And I'm all for that. I'm certainly all for an organized approach to it. I know that since the August 10 flood, my office has been collecting any number of reports from incidents about flooding. I was almost surprised to see a resident relayed back to me a survey they had received, or a survey that they had responded to. A city staff member had created a survey, cafes had distributed the survey, and I asked to look at the survey. When I saw it, I had expected that this would be a survey on the website or something. It was a survey on Google Forms, and it felt rather, I was like, is this an official City of Ottawa survey? It felt very, very ad hoc. I certainly appreciate the fact that the city was doing that survey. So can I assume that one goal of Councillor Carr's motion, where we will have better systems of collecting information that we can use to learn how to respond, can I assume that one goal would be to, for lack of a better term, professionalize the way in which we collect that info?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The form that you're referring to, I believe, is the one that Councillor Carr made reference to. We attended a meeting in the ward within 2 weeks of the flood, and decided that as much as we would be providing information to the community, that the community had a lot of valuable information to provide from us. And we had staff attend the meeting and walk people through that form. It is one of our goals to have that be formalized and perhaps can live on the website for reporting in these types of situations.
Yeah, because that form, like, I would certainly, regardless of what I was unsure about the officialdom of the form, the questions it was asked were quite valid. And I was like, should I be now taking this to my residents? But I guess, so one of my larger questions is, so in reference to my ward, we have experienced impacts from a wide array of events. Bryce Conrad was referring to the wide array of events. All of what Councillor Carr is focusing on us collecting and reporting information specific to flood damage. And yet our city can expect any number of, whether it be wind events, ice events, air quality events. Are we, if we are concentrating, if we are aiming towards centralizing on the website some kind of process for collecting and relaying information that is related specifically to flood damage, do we do that at the risk of perhaps having other ways of gathering information for other kinds of events?
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Yeah, I think that would be a 311 issue as well that we'd have to look at and do an all hazards kind of approach to reporting of these things, and we'd be happy to look into that as well. So I can't say that, you know, moving on the flood issue would compromise other events, but I think there's a holistic approach that we could take to ensure that from an emergency management perspective that we gather as much information as early as possible using the easiest of tools in order to come up with plans and programs to help people in the future.
I guess what I'm saying, if we go through all of the effort, which I think is a valid effort, of centralizing where and how we collect useful information from residents and put up resources where they can find how to respond to X, Y, or Z, if we do all of that for flood, and we do that, it takes 6-7 months to do it, and then we have it ready to go, and then boom, we have a completely different kind of event where it is just as vital to collect and relay information. I'm just asking, is there any value in considering whether or not this is to be focused exclusively on flood relief, or if the process of centralizing where we collect and dispel information should be more generalized to reflect any number of events, like killer squirrels?
I agree that there's value in having an all hazards approach to our development. So we will work closely with Tammy's group to ensure that whatever they are building from a flood perspective, we could expand on and include other disasters as well.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you to Councillor Carr for bringing the effort forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Councillor Hughley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Carr, for the motion. I have a question of staff. I have several questions, actually. Other than the enhanced data collection, what else is in there that you're not already doing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps I can elaborate a bit on that. And so I think the work with Councillor Carr and the motion is a little contained, but there's a lot of work that our department does. And we would remember the floods in Glencairn, back in 2009. And so our department is very active in developing engineering programs and engineering studies, right? So in 2009, there would have been a team of people and experts to come together and understand what happened. And a multi-million-dollar project was then established in order to, so there were some specific infrastructure upgrades that were made as a result of that. So we have teams that will do this analysis systematically. I think what is difficult for us to do is to be able to model every scenario. So that's where, having a way to collect information, that's our best information that we have in order to evaluate what happened. The August 10th storm was very localized, as it was described by Councillor Brockington, 110 millimeters. So it is very difficult to proactively determine what is at risk. And so it's important for us to have teams in place to do that analysis. Now, we also have infrastructure master plans. So when we think about the future subdivisions and the future plans and the intensification, so we have a report that's coming in front of committee and council that will speak to intensification, and it is around the stormwater management risks and the increasing of floods. We have our annual capital program that will take a look at, there's a whole criteria that we use to prioritize our capital program. Flood risk and previous flooding events are a high score in determining some of those priorities. We're coming forward in this term of council under regulations, provincial regulations, to have asset management plans in place for all of our core assets that include the stormwater system. So climate change is another lens to those plans that will also speak to what does that infrastructure, the existing infrastructure, so those address the asset management plans. And last but not least, we also work very closely with the climate change resiliency team that's also presenting reports to committee and council. And so there is an overall severe weather rain event mitigation strategy that's also being developed. I hope that helps to describe some of the work.
Well, I appreciate that you laid out all the things you're doing, but my question was, what are you not doing that's on that list?
You're speaking to the motion?
Yes.
There is nothing that is mentioned or presumed in that motion that our staff are not currently working on various plans. I think we need to work with 311 on the website itself, but we don't consider that to be a high level of effort.
Okay, and you brought up the West End flooding. You mentioned one of the communities, I think, was the face of that flooding. That's in my ward, but it was actually, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was the biggest flood that we've had in recent history in Ottawa. It was over 1,200 homes. It affected Stittsville, West Carleton, Canada North, and Canada South. And I worked with your colleague beside you there quite extensively. I think we talked every day for months on that. And it was a lot of really good work that came out of that. And that's where I'm coming from, where I'm saying, what are we not doing? Because I think a whole lot of new practices came out of that were very effective. And I'm happy to stand here and report and knock on wood while I say it, that there hasn't been a flood since. And I appreciate the work of staff to be able to say that. But one of the things we learned through that exercise, and it almost became a slogan, was that water on the street is good, because that's water that would have been in your basement if they hadn't have done that work. So when I hear about going in and fixing street flooding itself that's not impacting homes, that worries me, because the fix to that is to put it back into basements, and I hope we don't go that way.
You are correct. So we have a lot of allies around the table that have been very proactive in reminding residents that if there is street ponding, that is a good thing. And actually the system is designed to do that. So that is something with the 311, with the website. There's a public education component to that as well. I think there's a preparedness, but there's also, here's what's normal. And so in newer subdivisions, you will see the same thing. So it is designed to pond on the street. We encourage people to drive safely and slowly when that happens, but that you're...
I think, sorry to interject, Tammy, but I really think we need to educate more on that. We did back then. I haven't seen anything on that in a while. And it is important to let people know that, you know, when they see the big puddles and maybe it covers the whole street, but an hour or two later, it should all be draining away if the system's working right. I think we need to talk about things like the backflow valves, the inlet control devices that are being installed all over the city. Like, I think last budget, I saw something like 1,000 inlet control devices in that budget going into places. But there was also a program that I believe it was staff initiated, where they were partnering with landscaping companies and offering up some grants or contributions to homeowners to work with landscapers to landscape their property properly so that the water would run to the street versus run to their lowest point, you know? I think that's something that might be worth putting out there too. The other thing I want to touch on here was, and you did a bit in your listing of all the wonderful initiatives that you got on the go, but capacity is something that concerns me, because to the colleague on the other side of you in planning, when they're talking about ideas like take every lot and put four units on that lot, I wonder what that does to the capacity to the older neighborhoods if we start doing that. Because, for example, the ones in the West End, well, I'll use the one you mentioned, Glencairn, there was a study done that told us that if we made these changes, and there was a lot of money invested in the community, that said if we made these changes, we would have capacity that would last us in that area. And as I mentioned, there's been no flooding since. I worry with the stuff that's coming through planning or through building code, like with renovation permits, where they're adding 3 and 4 units onto these small lots. What's that do to the sewer connections? We dealt with one last year that they were adding 8 bathrooms to a single house.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Bear. So part of the infrastructure master plan, not only does the plan speak to expanded land capacity and kind of greenfield construction, but the plan and the report speaks also to the intensification challenges. And so we are proposing a program through that report where we do an infrastructure capacity program so that we can evaluate some of the changes from Bill 23. There have been site plan application changes, and so we do want to have a more proactive program to evaluate local capacity. So we have a very good understanding of our backbone infrastructure capacity, but we don't have the level of detail to take a look at the local capacity. So your comments are well said, and so the program that is being proposed in the infrastructure master plan is to exactly evaluate do we have drinking water capacity, wastewater, and stormwater. We're proposing some on-site stormwater management programs as well.
Thank you. I'll close with an ask or direction if it needs to be, that report recommends that those, if there's shortfalls in the infrastructure identified, that we put a pause on work in that area until the infrastructure can catch up to the demand. Because I don't want to go 10 years with homes being flooded until we can do the infrastructure work. And we have lots of areas within my ward and within the city that we can add that intensification to without causing capacity issues to the system. So I think that has to be a very, very high priority to assess before we go down the road. So thank you for all your answers today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hubli. Councillor Desroches.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Carr, for bringing this motion forward. I think it's an important one. And I echo the comments of Councillor Brockington that when we do have these events, the public doesn't want to be preached to, the public doesn't want to be told to repent. They want us to know what we're doing to strengthen our infrastructure and be more and more ready for the storms that will surely come. And I'm pleased to hear some of the good work we're doing. I often bring up the example of the roundabouts. The roundabouts are good for traffic, but they're also good when we have storms, because the roundabouts are going to work regardless of whether there's a power outage or what have you. So we're putting in some good infrastructure, I think, that will make us more resilient. And I agree with the part of the motion is that we communicate a lot better with the public in terms of what we're doing and kind of what to expect when you're expecting, right? What to expect when you're, we're going to have a storm. And Councillor Hubli did a good job of telling the public or helping inform the public that the streets are designed to flood. And there are going to be some extreme situations where that's not supposed to happen. We have to get our crews out there very quickly. But I think it'll be helpful that we have a very good elaborate communication plan in terms of what to expect and what's normal when we get into some storms. I know you're going to look at this further in terms of that communication, and I'll offer some feedback. I don't think we've got 311 right. We've got 311 right 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. But once we hit into the weekends and the evenings, you go through this whole long list, pay your taxes, do all these things, and then it says, if this is an emergency, we'll take your call. Well, we're a 24/7 society now. We're a big city, million people. I think we really got to look at our 311 that says, you've got flooding, you've got traffic lights out. That's not that needs to be dealt with quickly. And I'm always surprised when I report traffic lights out. They'll be out for like 40 minutes, and I'm the first one calling. And I just hope we're not turning people off, that the wait is too long to get to it, or that they interpret it that it's not an emergency. So I think we've got some work to do. We've got an emergency services and preparedness committee. It's something that I'm going to be drilling into over the course of the term, but I'll just leave you with that feedback that I'm not sure the 311 structure is set up for when we get into these situations. I don't know if we can kind of change the message once we get into severe situations so that, again, we're getting to the stuff immediately instead of going through a long queue about kind of paying taxes and what have you, that I think, again, is sort of the day-to-day stuff. But, people, when they're upset, people, when they're concerned, they want to talk to someone as quickly as possible. So look forward to seeing some progress on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Desroches. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be supporting this motion. I just want to highlight, first of all, what Councillor Hubli said is sort of fundamental to this conversation, I think. I understand Councillor Carr's motivation in putting this forward, but Section 3 of this motion, the be it further resolved, that staff review and report back to council. Councillor Carr has really the preventative flood and water management programs, including compassionate grant program, that kind of thing. But what I'm hearing you say is that there's many reports coming to us that that get at much more than this, which I think is what Councillor Hubli is saying. For me, we have the situation where the green space in Canada, a subdivision, was draft approved at the OLT with absolutely no stormwater management plan. Nothing that's ever been accepted or approved by the city, but yet the subdivision was approved. Like, that's a serious concern. And, we have, all of us, not maybe all of us, but most of us councillors have had bylaw calls where people have paved over their entire front lawn because they'd like to have a basketball court or whatever it is. And they can't understand why that might be a problem. When, you explain it to them and what that does to stormwater and to the rest of the street, if everyone did that, they understand a little bit better. So I guess what I want to focus on is the part 3 of this motion. The reports that are coming to us, they're going to be kind of coming at all different times. And I think it's important for people to understand all of it at the same time. And just one other comment, that I've also been talking to stormwater staff at length about the engineering standards that have been asked to be upgraded. They're 20 years old. So stay tuned for that. That is a concern that engineers are expressing all over this province, that they're asked to stamp things and put their names on things when they know the standards are 20 years out of date. So a lot more to come, and I'm wondering about sort of the timing of these reports so everyone has a clear understanding before we go through something and approve a planning application at planning where we don't maybe understand the ramifications of that regarding stormwater.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. Regarding, yes, I did go through a bit of a laundry list of all the things that we do. And so what I would like to propose as a first step is probably an information report that ties it all together and kind of, clarifies what's being done, and kind of like a work plan that's going to go along with that, because there will be the programs that Councillor Carr mentions in the motion around the compassionate grant, the protective plumbing. Councillor Hubely also mentioned what other municipalities are doing. So this is part of our Q1 work plan to review those programs and come to committee and council with recommendations. But I think what would be important is probably an information report first that outlines all of the different lines and program overlaps to help clarify what that roadmap looks like.
Great, thank you. I think that would be very helpful for everybody, because there's so many interrelated issues regarding stormwater here that I think we all need to better understand. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Menard.
Thanks, Mayor. Just briefly, I just want to thank Councillor Carr as well for this motion, Councillor Brockington. I'll repeat comments I made at the Environment Committee, and it's ironic that we've got the Service Line Warranties of Canada item on this agenda too, because we've been sending out letters to residents, and that program doesn't cover things like extreme events, the flooding into people's basements from those weather events. And we're going to have more and more of this taking place. We're going to have flooding that's going to take place, extreme heat events that are continuing to occur, and windstorms, which knock out our power. And so if we're going to be sending letters to our residents, this is exactly the type of thing that they want to hear. They want to hear two things. Number one, what can they do as individuals to help protect themselves for the extreme weather that is going to be taking place? And number two, how is the city facilitating that for them? What help is the city providing, given that we're going to have to adapt? This is happening now. We have no choice but to adapt to the extreme weather that we're all experiencing now. And this is exactly the type of motion and work that's needed to communicate to residents. We get asked all the time what they can do, what kind of backup power is needed, what kind of preparation they can do with those backup flood valves, what they can do to make sure that in extreme heat they're protected. And so this is the type of communication we need to go out to residents and facilitate that type of thing with a direct letter to our residents. So just want to thank the movers of the motion, and for staffs. I know good work is coming to the Environment Committee on these topics, so appreciate your good work, and I know you're seized with this as well. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Is the motion carried? All right, moving on to motion from Councillor Brockington on budget identification of non-mandated items. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a brief comment as further to the introduction of this motion 2 weeks ago. As we prepare to enter into our budget discussions in a few weeks' time, I do believe it's important for members of council and even the public to have as much information as possible as we consider priorities and consider maybe making changes to what gets resourced as part of our overall budget. And I think it's critical that we have a clear understanding of budget lines that are non-mandated items within our budget. I don't have a target on any particular budget line. I'm simply doing this because I'm looking for more information for the city treasurer to basically outline those items. And speaking with the city treasurer, he did indicate that this is possible, that a memo can be provided at a high level identifying those budget lines, and that's something that I really am interested in looking to see. So hopefully there's support for this and better inform our budget negotiations or deliberations that are coming up. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Troster.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if the mover could clarify what you mean by mandated item. Do you mean mandated by motions passed by council or by the municipal act or provincial legislation? Could you maybe provide an example of mandated versus non-mandated?
Well, yeah, municipalities do have mandated services that they are required to provide the population, their residents. This was a question actually that the treasurer asked. I would like to see ultimately that even though if city council has identified priorities that are non-mandated, those should be provided in the memo of the from the city treasurer. I'm not sort of prepared to give a shopping list of items that are and are not, because I want the memo, I want the city treasurer to provide that outline of the non-mandated items in particular, but if the city treasurer has anything to add at this time, I think that would be helpful.
Councillor Curry.
Mr. Mayor, as you know, in the service working group, Councillor Carr, you and I asked as well for this, and I mean, the answer was that this will be coming with a budget document. The challenge sometimes is, to Councillor Troster's question, is that some things are tied up in other regs, you know, so there's the acts, and then there's different regulations that have come about over time, so it's a little bit challenging to piece out, but I do wonder if our CFO can generally comment on what we will receive, because the debate, I think this is what Councillor Troster was getting at, the debate could be at, you know, what are we morally responsible for versus what are we mandated for? And so I think the idea was, Councillor Carr and the Mayor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but as a general overview, what do we absolutely have to do as a municipal government, what do we not? And then knowing that we also will make different decisions based on morals, values, current situations. But I was wondering if the CFO could give us a comment as what we might actually get.
Mr. Mayor, yes, and as the Councillor Brockton did mention, we did connect before the notice of motion came forward. So it will be relatively high level. To your point, from a mandated perspective, I would read that as, you know, municipally obligated to do as a council, but also any direction or policy that council is directing staff to do. And I can give several examples. At a municipal level, we're required to have one long-term care home, but we have 3, and that's endorsed by council. As a municipality, we're required to provide snow clearing for safe streets, but then we've enhanced that service where we clear sidewalks. Again, directed by a service standard by council. So the motion will be, or my memo will be relatively high level, giving the time frame to, if it were to go into a real deep dive in terms of every service we provide versus municipally mandated versus Planning Act, the Library Act, all these other things, support services for us to support all that. That is quite an endeavor to do. So I think the councillor is okay with that kind of high level type response that I discussed with him.
Okay. Is the motion carried? Thank you. There are 4 motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure, and in each case, it's because they're of a time-sensitive nature. So there's a motion from Councillor Leeper on the closure of part of Bayswater Avenue. On suspension of the rules, is that carried? Councillor Leeper?
You're not invited. Thank you very much, Mayor. The Bayswater Avenue traditionally starts the trick-or-treating at 5 o'clock. They close their streets in order to accomplish safe trick-or-treating. The special bylaw doesn't allow them to close the street before 6, so I'm bringing a motion. Thank you very much, Councillor Troster, for seconding it. Therefore, be it resolved that Council approve an amendment to the conditions of residential block party permit T07-15-23-0472 to allow for the closure of Bayswater Avenue between Hickory and Beach beginning at 5 p.m.
Is the motion carried? Motion from Conseillère Plante on a road closure and on suspension of the rules. Is that carried? Carried. Conseillère Plante?
Oui, merci beaucoup. J'aimerais juste le lire en français.
Thank you very much. I'd like to lead it in French. If you can put it up in French on the screen.
Monsieur le Maire, je ne sais pas si le français est disponible.
I don't know if we can do that, but we can put the English up on the screen and the councillor can read it in French if she likes. All right, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Whereas students at École élémentaire publique Tri des Bois will be celebrating Halloween.
Within the school building. Whereas École élémentaire publique Tri des Bois and the Ward 12 office has requested to close Alice Street between Saint-Charles and Laurier Avenue. Local access maintained between 8 a.m. and 8:45 a.m. to facilitate a student costume parade. And whereas the City of Ottawa's special event on City Streets Bylaw 2001-260 prohibits road closures before 6 p.m. Monday to Friday, therefore be it resolved that Council approve the above noted road closure to facilitate the event between 8 a.m. and 8:45 a.m. on Tuesday, 31st of October, 2023, providing it meets the requirements, conditions, and approval of traffic services. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Is the motion carried?
Carried.
Motion from Councillor King on 229, 231, 241, 245, and 247 Beechwood Avenue on suspension of the rules. Is that carried? Councillor King?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a motion to expedite the demolition of vacant properties on Beechwood Avenue due to property standards and public safety issues. That the rules of procedure be suspended to consider the following motion in order that the property owner may address these issues as soon as possible, whereas the buildings on the parcel of land known as 229, 231, 241, 245, and 247 Beechwood Avenue are owned by Smart Living Properties respectively, and whereas the buildings are currently vacant and subject to site plan control, heritage permit for demolition and new construction, and building permit processes, and whereas the buildings are in an uninhabitable state and pose a risk to public safety, including a recent fire at 229 Beechwood Avenue, and whereas the standard approval process under demolition control would take a considerable amount of time, and whereas the site plan application is nearing approval, the heritage permits have been issued in response to the Ontario Land Tribunal decision, and the owners have submitted for the corresponding building permits for the replacement residential buildings. Therefore, be it resolved that given the unique circumstances, Council waive demolition control approval and allow the owners to proceed directly to applying for a demolition permit for 229, 231, 241, 245, and 247 Beechwood Avenue without the requirement of demolition control, making the site safe for the public.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Devine?
Thank you, Chair. I was afraid of my microphone for a second there. I just have a brief question for staff. I was in the vicinity of this area the other day. One of my kids takes dance class, so I just drove by. I've never had to see one of these motions before. As I understand it, demolition control is the process whereby we're confident that the demolition permit can be safely issued. And so I just want to, because I haven't heard from staff and I'm not familiar with this process, I just want to, is staff satisfied that by skipping demolition control on this particular issue, we're not creating any kind of unsafe conditions for the demolition permit to be issued?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The obligation for a demolition permit would still exist. Demolition control deals with a situation where buildings were moved and a building permit is not ready to be issued. So there's a provision for cleaning the site, landscaping it in the interim. In this case, as the councillor noted, the site plan approval is imminent. Building permits have been applied for. So it's really just a timing issue to bridge. So no concerns.
Thank you.
Is the motion carried?
Carried.
Next, we have a motion from Councillor Kelly on fee relief for flood-affected buildings and structures. There's a deadline for applying to the Disaster Recovery Assistance for Ontarians on suspension of the rules. Is that carried? Councillor Kelly?
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate everybody's willingness to look at this today. This was just brought to my attention after a public meeting very recently since our last council meeting. So appreciate everybody's work on this, particularly the clerk's office this morning and Pred staff, as well as the mayor's office. Whereas several areas of the city of Ottawa were directly affected by flooding along the Ottawa River in May 2023, and repair or reconstruction of affected buildings and structures is required. And whereas in response to the flooding, the province of Ontario activated Disaster Recovery Assistance for Ontarians program in affected parts of the city, known as the DREO Activation Area. In documents provided on the province's DREO website as attached in document 1, which provides eligible applicants to recover certain costs of a natural disaster as described in memorandum issued to members of council by the General Manager of Finance and Corporate Services Department on July 14th, 2023, and whereas the following previous flooding events in 2019 and 2017, City Council provided relief for properties in flood-affected areas by way of amendments to the zoning bylaws, Section 73, as well as delegating authority for a limited time period to suspend application fees with respect to development applications, demolition permits, and building applications. And whereas similar fee relief following May 2023 flooding would assist the repair and reconstruction efforts of individuals in the City of Ottawa who have applied or will apply to the provincial DREO program by the program application deadline of November 10th, 2023. Therefore, be it resolved that the General Manager of Planning, Real Estate, and Economic Development Department be authorized to suspend the application fees and issue rebates for application fees already paid with respect to development applications submitted to the City of Ottawa by Disaster Recovery Assistance for Ontario program applicants for repair or reconstruction related to the May 2023 Ottawa River flooding event in the City of Ottawa, as described in this motion. And be it further resolved that the chief building official be authorized to suspend the application fees and issue rebates for application fees already paid with respect to demolition permits and building applications submitted to the City of Ottawa by DREO program applicants for repair or reconstruction related to the May 2023 Ottawa River flooding event in the City of Ottawa, as described in this motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Is the motion carried? Thank you. Notices of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'll just wait till we get this on screen for everybody. Whereas a climate change councillor sponsors group was established during the 2018-2022 term of council, and whereas the role of the councillor sponsors group is to provide advice to staff, integrate climate considerations into committee work, and champion implementation of the climate change master plan, and whereas at the City Council meeting of April 26, 2023, Council considered the report entitled Climate Change Master Plan Annual Status Update and approved that the Climate Change Councillor Sponsors Group be reestablished for the 2022-2026 term of council. And whereas members were not appointed to the sponsors group at that time, pending the completion of the advisory body review report, which was considered and approved by council on July 12, 2023, whereas it anticipated that the sponsors group will need to begin meeting late in 2023, and whereas the general procedural guidance for councillor sponsors groups approved by council in the advisory body review report provides that the mayor or designate and chair and vice chair of the relevant standing committee shall recommend to council the membership of the council sponsors group following a circulation for expressions of interest for members of council by the relevant department in consultation with the office of the city clerk. Whereas the circulation for expressions of interest is currently underway in anticipation of members being appointed at the November 8th, 2023 council meeting. Therefore, be it resolved that the Climate Change Councillor Sponsors Group be established with up to 5 members of council with representation from the urban area, suburban area, and rural areas, as well as the General Manager, Planning, Real Estate, and Economic Development, or designate and other city staff as required.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Motion to introduce bylaws. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mayor. That the bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws, 3 readings be read and passed.
Is that carried? Confirmation bylaw, Councillor Kelly.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of council meeting of October 25th, 2023.
Is that carried? Are there any inquiries? Motion to adjourn, Councillor Kelly.
That the proceedings of the City Council meeting of October 25th, 2023 be adjourned.
Is that carried? Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup.
Good afternoon, bonjour à tous. My name is Kendra Titley and I will be your moderator. Je m'appelle Kendra Titley et je serai l'animatrice de ce point de presse. I will now invite each agency in alphabetical order to ask their questions. You may ask one question with a follow-up. Par ordre alphabétique, j'invite maintenant chaque organisme à poser une question et une question de suivi. When asking your questions, please identify who your question is directed to, and if you are in council chambers, please use the microphone on my left. Lorsque vous posez vos questions, veuillez indiquer à qui s'adresse votre question, et si vous êtes dans la salle du conseil, veuillez le faire au micro à gauche. We'll now start with Elise Skura at CBC Ottawa.
Sure. One of the efficiencies we found at City Hall is to have fewer microphones.
Yeah, it's a wonderful system. All right, so my first question is for the mayor. We had heard from Hydro Ottawa that they did not get the money to be made whole after the derecho, and the chair had mentioned that you had been going to the premier to try and find some kind of solution, and I wondered if you could give us kind of an update on that situation.
I'll wait till you're back over there. Okay, let's pretend you asked from right there. So I've had a few conversations with the provincial government about it. I spoke with the Energy Minister, Todd Smith, recently about it as well. We're continuing those conversations, and we're still hopeful that there will be some help from the provincial government. It's tricky, and there's different programs, and they have different rules, and there's criteria and that sort of thing. So it's been challenging, but we continue to advocate on behalf of the city to get that funding.
Yeah, we got a chair. All right. My next question is for city staff, perhaps planning and infrastructure staff. This is about Minister Calandra at the provincial level's announcement this week about the rolling back of the official plan. I wondered what kind of discussions have to be had now in the next 45 days, and if there are options to keep some of those additions to the official plan.
Thank you for the question. Yes, certainly it was an unexpected announcement on Monday. So we are hoping to meet with ministry staff in the days ahead to get further detail and information on the minister's announcement and what is up for consideration. Is it specifically the provincial 30 modifications they made to the official plan, including the urban boundary? It seems so, but those are the types of questions and clarification we'll be seeking in the days ahead and advising council on.
Yes, so the version, the infrastructure master plan that was just put out, I think last Friday, is for the current official plan. So it does include infrastructure projects required for servicing those plans. So our report, our plan would also have to be amended once the official plan is updated and finalized.
Thank you. We'll now go to Arthur White-Crummey at CBC Radio.
Just a further follow-up to that, can both of you just speak to how disruptive it was to have done all the work on things like the infrastructure master plan, on other planning documents that we've been preparing, and then to see to have to go back to the drawing table on things like the IMP? And further, have you identified any parcels yet that you want to retain in the official plan during this 45-day period?
Thank you. I'll start, and Tammy can add on. So certainly, there has been a fair amount of work over the last year based on the official plan that was approved by the minister. Affects our infrastructure master plan, transportation master plan, our work on the development charge bylaw, our urban tax transit area. So yes, it impacts a lot of work that's happened over the last year. The minister has indicated that they are prepared to compensate municipalities for some of those costs that were incurred. So we'll be anxious to find out more about that. But yeah, so it's definitely impacted the work that's gone on the last year. And in terms of your question about parcels, we have not made any determination or draft recommendations on that point.
This is for the mayor and for staff. I'm not sure who would like to take it, but the Lansdowne annual report has just come out, and it shows another year of negative net income. And also the pro forma was adjusted to show that there's even less distributions that are expected over the 40-year course of the agreement. Can you just speak to what that means for the viability of the current partnership and how it affects the case for Lansdowne 2.0?
Do you want me to start? Sure. The city has not had to cover any losses, any operating losses for Lansdowne Park throughout the time that we've been in partnership with the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group. Those losses have all been covered by OSEG. And I think what this underscores is the need to create a financially sustainable model going forward. I think Lansdowne 1.0 has been a great success on many levels. We know that millions and millions of people have been to the site, and it's created lots of jobs, and there's a vibrancy, and there's so many different ways that you can go to Lansdowne and enjoy what it has to offer. But the financial sustainability has to work going forward, and I think that's what we're trying to achieve with the new plan for Lansdowne, is to make sure that we can bring more events to the site, that we're not hampered by the declining facilities that are there, that are aging, that are 55 plus years old, and make sure that we have a viable plan going forward. So I think the new plan addresses that. And again, we have to compare this not to not to some ideal scenario, but to a practical scenario. When Lansdowne, before Lansdowne 1.0 happened, we had a giant parking lot and some aging facilities. Now we have a much more vibrant site, and it's been a success, and there's been an extraordinary community benefit. And going forward, if we move forward with Lansdowne 2.0, then we will see even more benefits and even better facilities and more vibrancy and more activity. The financial model has to work, and we don't want there to be an issue of sustainability. But there are many, many different ways to measure the success of this project. It's not just a financial return that we're looking for. We're trying to create benefit for the community, and we've done that already, and we will continue to do so. Did you want to add something, Wendy?
I was just going to add to that. I mean, in terms of what happened in 2022, it's really not a surprise in terms of what's been occurring over the years. To the mayor's point, OSEG has been covering those losses, but I think this just underpins the report that has gone forward for Lansdowne with respect to what the future looks like and making something that is sustainable. So it really supports the new model that we're putting in front of council.
Thank you. We'll now go to Leah LaRocque at CTV Ottawa.
This one's for you, Wendy.
Actually, it's for you. I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, if you can comment on Hydro Ottawa saying today that residents of Ottawa should, given just the wacky weather that our city has been having, residents should prepare. There's a prospect that we're going to have a lot more of these multi-day outages, a lot more stress on our Hydro One infrastructure, and residents should be prepared for multi-day outages.
First of all, I would say that we're lucky to have a highly, highly reliable electricity supply in Ottawa. I know what I experience and what my family goes through whenever the power is out, even for an hour. We've been through multi-day outages in the past at our home, and it's very, very frustrating when it's not working. But at the same time, we try to remind ourselves, and I say to my kids, the system works 99.99, I don't know the exact number, but it works extremely well most of the time, almost all the time. It's very rare that there's an outage. It's very rare that there's a multi-day outage. So we have to remember that. But we're all aware of the impacts of climate change and the fact that we all need to be more ready for emergencies. I don't think when I was a kid, we talked about emergency preparedness in my home, but I think with families today, that's something that kids talk about in schools and families talk about in their homes, that we all need to be ready. I know people have talked about having a backup generator or having other sources of power and having plans in place as a family, storing water and other supplies, that sort of thing. So I think we're all aware of what's going on around the globe. We're not alone. We are lucky that we have a very reliable power supply and that problems are fixed very, very quickly by any standard internationally, nationally, provincially. And we just all have to be better prepared going forward. Oh, let's turn that on. Yep.
Okay, so you've been mayor for a year now. I'm just wondering if you can look
Not
back.
quite.
Almost,
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
Mayor-elect, I guess, for
Yes.
officially a year. I'm just wondering if you can look back at the year and say what you think is the biggest highlight, but also what was the biggest challenge?
As I've said before, it's been the greatest honor of my life to be the mayor of my hometown. I love this city. I love the people of Ottawa. I love this community. And the opportunity to step into this role a year ago has really been a tremendous honor for me and frankly for my family as well. It's been a rewarding journey. It's been fascinating. I'm really grateful for all of the moments that I've had in the last year where I've gotten to meet the great people of Ottawa. This is one of the wonderful things about this role is you get to see how the community works and all the amazing people who contribute to our city, and to go around the community and see the hardworking people at not-for-profit organizations and other community groups that give so much to the city, the volunteers, the community leaders, and to see the amazing staff at the City of Ottawa. I've said this many times, one of the most encouraging things that I can report from my first year is just how wonderful the team is at the City of Ottawa, who work hard every single day to serve the residents of this community and are dedicated, truly dedicated to community service. So I'm encouraged by all of that, and I'm very optimistic. At the same time, I would say that we're facing a lot of challenges as a community. There are a lot of big challenges. We have a big hole in our transit budget going forward. It's going to be very, very difficult to close that gap on our own. Impossible, frankly, to do it on our own. We will have to get help from other levels of government. We know that going into this winter, there will be more pressure on our shelter system than ever before. There are a number of reasons for that, but homelessness and new people arriving in the city are putting a lot of pressure on the system, and we're going to need some solutions for that. And again, we're going to need the help of other levels of government. And I know that's probably a recurring theme and a familiar phrase that I'm going to be repeating over and over again in the weeks and months ahead, but we face a lot of big challenges as a community, and perhaps some of those are even bigger than I anticipated when I ran for mayor last year. And you know, there is a lot of, I think, hard work that can go into solving those, but also there's the need for support from other levels of government to tackle those challenges.
Thank you. Nous allons maintenant à Julien Paquette, à la 3.
Julien Paquette from Le Droit. Hello, hello. First of all, let's get your reaction to the province's decision announced on Monday. Are you happy about what's been done? Are you happy with the province's decision on Monday about the urban boundary? the way the decision was made wasn't necessarily very kosher, let me put it that way. Well, it's very new. We will have to review the province's decision, and we'll have to answer, we'll have to respond. But it's very new, it's just happened. I think that the City of Ottawa, or the former council, adopted an official plan, and it was the province that made changes to that plan. And now we're back to the plan that the former council adopted. I'll have to look at this, review it, and I'll be talking to councillors, and I'll be talking to city staff as well about this. But my initial reaction is that the plan that the previous council adopted and developed, it makes sense.
City Council approved an official plan, and now based on the decisions that the provincial government has made, that's basically the official plan that we have before us. And I'm prepared. I want to work with staff and work with councillors and hear what everyone has to say. But with regard to the urban boundary in particular, I'm prepared to accept the official plan that council approved and move on from there. There's a lot of detail that we need to go through because it's not just the urban boundary that's affected by the changes. There are policy decisions and other things that were in the official plan. So we have to go through those one by one and make sure that we're comfortable with them. But on the urban boundary, I'm fine to move forward if councillors are with the plan that was approved by the previous council.
Ma deuxième question, en lien avec quelque chose qui a été dit.
My second question is about something that Mr. Dorrell said very quickly. Now, he said that the pace of change, well, the way things are going currently now, really, that the city has next to no chance of actually meeting its climate change targets. Is that your reading of the situation, or do you still have hope that you'll be able to eliminate or reach carbon neutrality at the date you've set yourself for?
The question was regarding the impacts to the climate change master plan from the hydro report.
Well, Mr. Durrell basically said that the way things are going right now, at the rhythm, the work is being done, there's basically no chance that that the city reaches their targets from the climate change master plan. And I was just wondering if the city shares this analysis of the situation.
So certainly, the city acknowledges the challenge ahead of us. We're still optimistic we can meet our corporate obligations, but in terms of the broader environment, it's going to require much more effort and support from our federal and provincial partners in order to affect the kind of changes that are ahead of us and consistent with our climate change master plan. So I acknowledge the challenge ahead, but we are still working aggressively to the extent we can.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. We'll now go to Blair Crawford at the Ottawa Citizen.
One of the disadvantages of going last is everyone else asks your questions. But I'll just expand maybe on what Lee asked about your first year in office, or almost year in office. And what would you consider your number one accomplishment, or this council's number one accomplishment in the last year?
To be honest, I don't really think in those terms. I go to work every day on behalf of the people of Ottawa and trying to serve the community and make responsible decisions. And I'm I'm pleased that, and I've heard from the members of the community that they've noticed a change in tone in the last year compared to the previous term of council, and I think a lot of work went into that, a lot of relationship building and collaboration, and I'm pleased that we passed the first budget unanimously. Then it met my campaign promise for a 2.5% tax increase. I'm pleased that we're opening a neighborhood operations center in the Byward Market. I've heard from a lot of business owners and residents in the past few days since that decision was taken by the Police Services Board that they're very encouraged by that. But to be honest, I don't really look back and look at, and sort of rank decisions or accomplishments. We have a lot of challenges in front of us, and that's my focus. So most days when I get up, I'm not thinking about the past. I'm thinking about all the things that are in front of us. And we do face a lot of challenges as a city. We're lucky to live in a wonderful community, and I'm very proud of this city. But we've got some big stuff to tackle in the coming months and years around transit, around homelessness and housing, around affordability, and so that's my focus is on tackling those challenges.
Thank you.
Thanks, Blair.
No follow.
On va maintenant à Frédéric Pépin.
Frédéric Pépin from Radio-Canada. Hello, Mr. Sutcliffe. Hello. You've just mentioned very quickly the Byward Police Station. You said you've talked to businesses who are very, very happy. We're receiving emails from people, business owners who are not happy where the police station has been set up on Rideau Station. They had hoped that it would be in the heart of the Byward Market. And they also want to know whether there will be social services available in this station. There's not much detail on that. What would you say to people who are disappointed by the location of the station and the services will be offered? In English and in French, please. Well, first of all, thank you very much for your question. Now, this is a decision that was made by the Police Services Commission. It was not my decision. It was made by the Police Services Board, rather. But what is important for me is that it be close to the Byward Market. It's right next to it, in fact. Solutions can't be developed in an office. Solutions have to be developed in the market itself. Now, while we have a team in the Rideau Street station, which is available to look at the Byward Market, that's part of the solution. It's not the location of the office that's really that important. It's also important to point out that it's difficult, and I'm sure that the Chief of Police could add more detail to this, but he told me that it's very, very difficult to find the ideal location. This is the best possible solution we have available to us at this current juncture. Now, for the other services that you talked about, that's a process that's ongoing. Now, the police chief and the other police leaders will be working with social services, community social services, and other social services as well, to develop solutions and decide where the services will be provided from that office, that center, or from somewhere else. So we're just at the start, really, of the conversation on this topic.
So I'm glad to see that there is an office there, and I have heard from residents and business owners that they're glad to see progress on that. Some people may not feel it's the ideal location, but to me, it's not about what happens in the office. It's the fact that there will be police officers available from that location who will be able to work in the Byward Market. And so the location of the office is less important than the activities on the ground and the work that they will be able to do in that community. And in terms of having other partners involved, I think it's the beginning of the process on that. So the first step was to secure a location for the police to get in there and get set up. And then from there, we can work with partners to see what other services could be provided from that location or potentially from other locations nearby.
All right. So we heard you speak about Minister Calandra's announcement, and we also heard you talk about the derecho today, and that you're in discussions with the province. Now, the province will have to help municipalities, including Ottawa, financially. Do you feel that you're being listened to by Queen's Park, and that there are other priorities, health and all the rest? Do you think you'll be able to get the money that you need from the province? Answer. Well, so far, I'm pretty pleased with the relationship we have with the provincial government. Each time I send a letter to the Premier, he answers me back right away. I've had many conversations with the new minister, Mr. Calandra. We have regular discussions, conversations. Now, the government's decision on the official plan, this is something that the council has been calling for. It's not exactly what we asked for, but it's a part response, a part answer, if you like. I think that the provincial government is listening to our needs. But we have many challenges here in Ottawa, and we will do in the coming months and years. We need a significant assistance for public transit, for homelessness, for mental health, for affordable housing, etc. So I think, I hope rather that the province will be forthcoming with that assistance. And all the conversations we've had to date are very productive. But we have to see whether the province will put its money where its mouth is.
This concludes today's media availability. Ceci conclut le point de presse d'aujourd'hui. Thank you, merci.
Merci.